So what we're going to do is we're going to cover in the series GCFScape, and the newer version will extract VPK files. We're going to use the Crowbar decompiler and recompiler tool. I'm going to use Blender as my editor and as my compiler. I'm going to use GIMP for the textures, VTF edit to create quick and simple little VMT files, and Source FilmMaker, of course, is where we're going to see the end results. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the same model I used in the original series, where I take this model, change it into this model, 5 different textures and an animated texture. So basically, that's what I plan on doing. I can do it in less than 12 videos like the old series took. Anyway, that's the intro. Let's get on with the series. Hey guys, Private Jack here. Welcome to part 1 of the series on how to take a Valve model, decompile it, edit it up a little bit, and get it back into Source FilmMaker as its own model. What we're going to do is we're going to use a static model in this particular case, and eventually what I might do another series on how to take a static model, make it into an actual usable model that somebody can drive around in. Anyway, this being the first in the series, what we're going to do is we're going to cover the tools that we're going to use and where to get them. I'm not going to show you how to install them. There's lots of info with the tools, how to install them, whatnot else. Get them onto your computer. Everybody has their computer set up different, so basically I'm not even going to go there. I'm just going to show you where to get the tools and the tools that we're going to use. So let's get started here. First thing you're going to need is Blender, or if you use Maya, go for it. I mean, use Maya all you want. Me, I prefer Blender, and that's the tool that I'm going to use through this entire series. Okay, you can get Blender now on Steam. All you have to do is go to the store, click on, look up Blender, and click the install button. Free, right there. It'll install for you, and everything's good to go. Okay, next tool, Blender Source Tools. This is a plugin for Blender. When I first did a video on the new Steam version, I thought that it actually came down with the Blender version, but it doesn't. So you're going to have to go off and go to steamreview.org, Blender Source Tools, and download the latest version. 2.52 and above, I believe, only work with Blender 2.74 or later. And the version of Blender that you get from Valve is 2.75, and it just went into an A series a day or two ago. So basically, this tool will work with the Steam version of Blender. The next tool that we're going to look at is Crowbar. Crowbar is a new compiler. Well, it's not really that new. It's already into version 0.24. Zach McCaw has done an excellent job on this particular tool. It will actually decompile the HWM type models. It's not quite there yet, but it's getting close. And from what I can see here, he's put out a new release here on the 3rd of July. It looks like he's getting ready to put out a new version of this thing. Wonder what that's going to do. But this is not only a decompiling tool, it's also a compiler, and it's very easy to set up. Okay, next item up for bids is GCFScape. Back when I did the original video, Valve was still using GCF files for their game cache file format. When Pipeline rolled out, what they did is they changed the format and called it VPK. And these VPKs, the old versions of GCFScape, let's put it this way, the old versions of GCFScape prior to version 1.8.4 could not open VPK files and extract the new format. So Nemesis Tools here, the guys that wrote the programs, said we can fix that. They put out version 1.8.5, and this tool will now extract game cache files from the new Pipeline VPK files. Program that I forgot to mention in the intro was Notepad++. I use Notepad++ because it's a programmer's tool. It gives me line numbers, it gives me pure text editing, and it's what I needed for doing the job. If I use the regular Microsoft Notepad, I run the risk of not saving it to the proper format. Yeah, it's text, but it's not. It's rich text, and some of the configuration files that we're creating just don't handle RTF files. Next tool that we're going to use is GIMP, and what GIMP is an image editor. And what you do with this is you create your textures or edit your textures for the actual model that you're working with. GIMP also has a VTF plugin, okay, which allows you to actually manipulate and save VTF files straight from GIMP. So that's another tool that you're going to require. Last thing that I'm going to cover right now is VTF Edit. VTF Edit version 1.33, from what I've heard, might be a little bit buggy. I haven't had any problems with it for what I do in my models for Source FilmMaker. However, if you do find that it is buggy, you can always roll back and go back to version 1.3.1, and that version supposedly works quite well as well. A couple of little notes. There is an installer for Windows, and if you're using Windows or above, there's certain little things that you have to do in order to make it work. So read through the file, it'll tell you how to do it, and basically, yeah, that's it. So those are the tools that you're going to require for this process. Oh, of course, you're going to require SFM if you're going to make movies. But anyway, those are the files that we're going to, the programs that we're going to be covering in this particular series. And like I say, I'm not going to show you how to install them because that only takes a heck of a lot of time, and a lot of people already have this stuff on their computer. So I'll leave a note in the description on where you can go and pick these things up. So with that, the next thing we're going to look at is GCFScape, and we're going to use it to extract a game file, and then from there we're going to carry on. Hey gang, Private Jack here. Welcome to part 2 in my sessions on how to decompile a Valve asset, get it into Blender, edit it a little bit, and then fire it back at Source FileMaker. What we're going to cover in this particular session is we're going to start working on the programs. First one we're going to talk about is Source FileMaker and basically GCFScape. So, Source FileMaker. Source FileMaker found in your Steam client library under software. If you have a problem, what you're more or less going to be told is validate your game or your local game cache files. So how do I do that? All you do is come into your client, come down here to Source FileMaker, right-click on it, move into Properties. Down here on the Local Files tab, there's another button here, Verify Integrity of Application Cache. That's what we're telling you to do. What this will do is it'll start a process where the client will actually go through and validate your applications that you have on your computer, the actual game files, and will go into a download mode to replace any corrupted or broken or missing files. When you click that little button there, it's going to take quite a while to download or to actually go through and verify. And that's depending on the amount of content that you've added to Source FileMaker. For example, Source FileMaker currently has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 download content packages. If you decide to download all these packages, you're looking at anywhere between 16 and 20 gigs on your hard drive space. So if you're running out of disk space, you don't want to bring the download content down. Okay. Let's see. You're trying to upload something to the workshop or something up to a screenshot or an artwork, and it comes back and tells you that you don't have enough disk space. What that's referring to is if you go into the Source FileMaker properties and come down here to the Updates tab, if you click on that, down here at the bottom of the screen, you're going to find Steam Cloud. And if you have Enable Steam Cloud Synchronization for Source FileMaker checked on, Steam is going to give you a gigabyte of space on the Steam server to store your stuff. Once you run out of that gig, you're out of space. You've got one of two options. You can either go in and start deleting stuff off the cloud or open a new account, because that's all you get is at 1 gig. And it doesn't matter what you actually load. If you upload models, if you upload scripts, if you upload pictures, if you upload videos, the rest of that kind of stuff, it all counts against this little cache that they give you. And each program that Steam has that has a workshop has an allotted amount of space for that particular game. So if, for example, if I come in here and I go to my games and down to Team Fortress 2, go into the properties, check my updates, there, see? They've actually given me almost 1.5 gigs for Team Fortress 2 uploads. Okay, that's pretty much Source FileMaker, and let's talk about the SDK. Okay, so basically what we're going to tell you is launch the SDK. The way you launch the SDK is you come into Source FileMaker, you launch Source FileMaker, and you're given two options here. You can either go straight into Source FileMaker, or you can launch the SDK. Launch the SDK right there, and if you'll be presented with a little screen here, and there's all kinds of weird and wonderful stuff here, like Source FileMaker. You can launch Source FileMaker from here, the Hammer Editor, which is a map editor, or the model viewer. Here, if we tell you to reset your game configurations, all you have to do is come in here and click on that and say, OK, all the prompts. Done. Okay, you can actually delete the game configurations or remove the environment variables altogether. Also, we're going to tell you about Edit Search Paths. We're going to go into that in more detail at a later date when we actually get into adding mods through GCFScape. So I'm going to leave that for now. But that's the Source FileMaker SDK. Also up here, you can click on here and go to the Frequently Asked Questions website, and right here, tutorials, click on the tutorials, watch the tutorials. All you can do is, like, if you want to know anything about Source FileMaker, this is where you're going to learn it. And as you can see, I've watched them all many, many, many times. Okay, that's Source FileMaker out of the way. GCFScape. What GCFScape is a game cache file extractor. And you're going to say, well, what do I need a game cache file extractor for? And the answer is nothing, if you're willing to work with the materials that download with Source FileMaker. However, if you want to load things from CSGO, Left 4 Dead 2, Portal 2, Bloody Good Time, and the list goes on, all the Valve games, then what you have to do is you have to actually extract game cache files from the actual games to do that, and port them into Source FileMaker so that the assets become available. The reason for that is that Source FileMaker cannot reach out and read into other game files. It's a standalone utility that reads files from its own directories. It doesn't branch out into the rest of the world like Gary's mod does. So, we're going to extract a quick game here. I'm going to bring in Bloody Good Time. What I did is I actually went through and that's the other thing. If TF2 goes through an update and it's got new taunts and new models and all the rest of that good stuff, and you want that stuff now and aren't willing to wait around for Source FileMaker to update, then you need GCFScape to actually go into the game cache file and extract that and bring it into Source FileMaker. So with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to extract a game file, and as I was starting to say, I did extract the newest download of TF2, and basically I found no difference between the actual SFM version and the extracted version that I took out yesterday. So there's not much sense in me showing you how to do that. So the process is the same. It doesn't matter what game you're actually extracting from or putting into Source FileMaker. What you do is you launch GCFScape, there we go. Okay, I said I was going to extract Bloody Good Time, and basically what that is a little game that's out there available. It's a Steam game, or a Valve game, and it's kind of fun. So to extract it, what I have to do is I actually have to open up the game cache files. The game cache files are located within the folder for the actual game. So let's say Alien Swarm. If I wanted to extract Alien Swarm, if I come in here and go into Swarm and scroll down through the list here, I'm going to find a bunch of files that usually start Pt1 VPK, and they have a little extension here. What these are combined VPKs. They're like, I don't know, expanded zip files, I guess is a good example of it. And what you have to do is you have to find the actual header file for the PK, for the pack. And the header file usually has an underscore dir.vpk in the file name. So if I open that up right there, I'm going to find that I've opened up the game cache files for Alien Swarm. If I open up one of the ones that are not the header, I'm not going to get the whole file, and I'll usually get an error, okay? Because I'm not looking at the actual header file for the VPK. Okay, so let's get Bloody Good Time and get that into Source FileMaker. So here I've got GCFScape open. I'm going to File, Open. I'm going to go into my common folder. I'm going to go down to my actual game folder, Bloody Good Time. I'm going to open that up. And in this particular case, the VPKs are actually in a folder called VPK. I open that up, and here, if you'll notice, I've got two different sets of VPKs. I've got 2451 and 2452, and both have header files. If I open up this first one, and what I'm looking for in this actual folder are models, materials, particle, and sound folders. And I drill into these folders, I'm going to find that I don't have those particular, I've got a materials folder, but it's just for the debug engine and the VGUI. And if I go into PM, I don't have a models, materials, particle, or sound folder. So this is not the one that I need. I'm going to come back up to open up the next one, and I'm going to come down here to 2452 DIR. I'm going to open that one up. I'm going to drill into this folder, and here I find it. I've got maps, materials, models, particles, and sound folders. Okay. Most times, all that you're going to find in the maps folders in a game cache file are Navi files and resource files. Usually in an actual game, the maps are located in the actual game folder under the game name maps folder. I'll show you that in a minute. But right now, what I want to do is I want to grab that materials, models, particles, and sound folder. I don't want anything else. If I extract anything else out of this file, I will most likely screw up Source FileMaker. Now, what I want to do here is I want to extract these. So I'm going to right-click on the ones that are selected, and I'm going to click on Extract. And then I'm going to point this file browser down to where Source FileMaker lives. So C, Program Files, x86, Steam, Steam Apps, come on, Steam, thank you, Steam Apps, Common, Source FileMaker, all the way down to Source FileMaker. I'm going to open up that. I'm going to go into the game folder, and I'm going to click on the game folder. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new folder under the games folder. And I'm going to call this BGT for Bloody Good Time so I can reference it quickly. And I say, make sure it's selected and say OK. What will happen is GCFScape will now go through and it will start extracting those particular folders, and it will put them in that new folder that I just created called BGT. Scroll down. There's the material folder going in now. Now this is going to take a few minutes to do because it's got to go through and extract all the materials, all the models, all the particles, all the sound files. So I'll come back when this is done. Okay, just about finished here. Another 1,000 files. And as you can see, it added the materials, models, particles, and sound folder to that Bloody Good Time folder that I actually created. When it finishes, GCFScape will become available. I can move the actual screen here. If this was still extracting, I wouldn't be able to move on this screen. Okay, now that that's done, what I have to do is I have to tell Source FileMaker that that folder exists and that there's stuff in there for it to use. The way I do that is I go into the SDK. So I'm going to launch Steam, launch Source FileMaker, come down here, select Launch SDK, and click Launch. This is where this edit search path for selected mod comes into play. I'm going to click on that. Now, all these folders in here have custom content in them. The usual folders that are available are TF Movies, TF. TF Update is where I put my extracted copy of the TF game file. Now, when I put it into the folder, what I usually do is I put it underneath TF. That way, only anything that is new to the actual game, or to the different from the game to SFM, will show up in that particular folder. This works on a hierarchy principle, where user mod has the highest priority, and things are loaded from there first. So it goes user mod, TF movies, TF updates, Left 4 Dead, Half-Life 2, Workshop, and down the line, right? Well, here's that BGT folder that I just put in there, and it is not checked on. In order for Source FileMaker to be able to find it, I have to check it on. And then I can pick it up and I can drag it anywhere I want in this particular file hierarchy. Okay, so let's say I want it above Workshop. I drop it there and I turn Workshop on. So now only these assets are being loaded into Source FileMaker. I don't need the rest of the stuff. I don't plan on working with it right now. Okay, so basically I ported Left 4 Dead 2 content. It's in here. I've ported Day of Defeat content from the actual game file folders. It's in here. This Dino D-Day is the actual download content from Source. And I've ported CSGO into Source Filmmaker as well. But it is not checked on, therefore it will not be available in my session if I launch the session now. Okay, so now I am going to launch a session. Eventually it'll load up. There we go. See, it's not only you guys that have a long time waiting for Source Filmmaker to open, and I have a pretty strong computer. But right now I'm recording video. I've got another 7 or 8 different processes in the background running at the same time. There's the white screen. We're waiting for Source Filmmaker to load up, and there it is. I'm going to create a session. I'm not going to load a map. I'm just going to go into my create an animation set for new model just to show you what has happened. Okay, so here's a good example. I have subscribed to this particular item on the workshop. As soon as I start Source Filmmaker, I will get a pop-up saying it's ready for download. All I have to do is say yes, okay, if I want to download it. If I don't want to download it for this session, I can click it off and click OK. And then the next time I load up Source Filmmaker, this screen will pop up again, but we'll bring it down this time. If you get a workshop file conflict error, say yes to all, or it will not work. All files downloaded from the workshop, and it's now available. Okay. So right now it's going through, it's caching every model that is available in memory. Up here, the mods filter. Basically what that is, if you can actually point out to individual mods that you want to download, or you want to view assets from. So if I go in here to user mod, only my user mod stuff is going to show up. If I go down here and go into TF movies, only the stuff that's loaded from TF movies will show up. TF, and like I say, if I go into TF update, there shouldn't be anything there. No model files. There was no difference between the TF movies and TF stuff that comes down through Source Filmmaker and the update that I actually loaded into Source Filmmaker to see if there was any changes. And you'll notice that this is in the file hierarchy order that is in the game info text file. Here's my bloody good time folder, and these are the assets that actually loaded up that I ported into Source Filmmaker. Animation files, various player models, and a whole raft of assets and weapons. Somebody looking for a sheep? No, there's a weapon sheep. And this is one that I'm going to actually do a Source Film or a tutorial on, taking an asset and making something useful out of it. Okay, so basically that's Source Filmmaker and GCFScape, and why you would want to use GCFScape. And basically I have nothing else to say on this matter, so if you have any questions, put them in the comments, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. Hey gang, Private Jack here. Welcome to part 3 of my series on how to decompile a static model, get it into Blender, edit it a little bit, and fire it back at Source Filmmaker as its own model. So basically in this session what we're going to do is we're going to talk about Crowbar. And because Crowbar is such a simple tool to use, install, and use, what I'm going to do is actually show you how I go about doing that. To get the tool, what I do is I go into Steam, go to Community, and head for the home page. From here, what I do is I've come down here into Groups, because Zach Mackay has an actual group for this tool, and I type in here Crowbar Tool. Hit Enter, and down here, right here, Crowbar Source Engine Modding Tool is his group. Click on that, go to the group, and right here he has a download link for the tool. Click on that, it'll take you to the download page. Click on the current version that's available is 0.24. It comes down as a 7Z compressed file. Click on that, take you to the download page, click on download, and you can put this thing anywhere you want on your computer. For simple use, what I do is I put it on my desktop. So save as, and throw it on my desktop. That's how fast it comes down. This is already downloaded complete. So I can exit out of that, I can exit out of this, and here's the tool right here on my desktop. I use WinRAR to decompress compressed files, and I already have 7Z set up to work with it. So all I have to do now is right-click on the file, drag it somewhere on my desktop, drop it, and extract to. That will create a new folder on my desktop right here. Now, it doesn't matter where this folder lives on your computer, as long as the Crowbar exe can find the data folder in the same folder that you put it in, it's going to work. To use Crowbar, you can simply drag and make a shortcut on your desktop, or just double-click on the exe file. This is the graphic interface that Crowbar uses. It's pretty simply laid out, and as I mentioned in part 1, this tool is not only a decompiler, but it is also a compiler. We're going to get into the compiler later on when we actually start compiling models to go back into Source Filmmaker. So we're just going to leave that for now. The decompiler, click on the decompiler tab, okay? And basically all you have to do is set up the information that you want to pull out of the model file, i.e. the QC file, the reference mesh. If you're working with the Left 4 Dead 2 survivors, there's a glitch in the right hand, and Zach has programmed Crowbar to fix that. And if you're using the Left 4 Dead 2 survivors, all you have to do is click that on to do the fix. Level of detail mesh files, the collision model, the physics model, vertex animations, VTAs. If you want the VTAs for, let's say we were doing one of the models that have facial flexes, we can actually pull the VTA out of the model file. Bone animations, if there's actual sequences built into the model, we can pull those animations out, ragdoll, idle, whatever. And procedure bones, which are the jiggle bones and that kind of information. So, once I have this set up, Let's go back here for a sec. Okay, extra information. If I click on this extra information stuff, or debug info as comments and debug info files, what that does is it gives me extra files that if I find that I have a bug in Crowbar, I can actually send those files back to Zek on his group page. There's a discussion link there for reporting bugs. He's going to want to see these files. And once we decompile the model, I'm going to leave these checked on. And once we decompile the model, I'm going to show you what these things are. Okay, so to decompile a model, all I have to do is point to the model file that I want to decompile. So browse, and in this particular case, we're going to do the photo badge. So the photo badge lives, and game, Source FileMaker game TF, because it's a TF model, and TF installs with Source FileMaker. Go into the models folder, come down to player, it's a player item, player, items. This particular item is an all class item, so I'll drill into all class, and I find photo badge right here. This is the model that I want to decompile. I'm going to click on open once I select the model, and it's going to put the information here. Now, I can either decompile this model and send it back to a decompile folder under the all class folder, but I don't want to do that. I want to be able to access this thing quickly and not have to go looking for it. So I'm going to actually override the default folder by clicking full path. I'm going to click on browse, and I'm going to send this back to my desktop. Once I get into desktop, I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call this folder photo project. I'm going to click on photo project and drill into it, and I'm going to open that. It places the information here in the full path, and this is where it should decompile. However, I've found that there may be a bug in this particular thing, and what will happen is after I first assign a new folder, I actually have to go back in and reassign it again, or what will happen is it will decompile to the default folder under the folder where I pulled the model from. So browse again, go into desktop, photo project, open, and now it should end up here. Once I have this set up, all I have to do is click on decompile model. Once that's done, it writes a whole bunch of stuff here. If I go into the actual folder, I should find all the stuff that came out of that model. In this particular case, all there was the QC and the reference mesh. If I drill into animations, it has an idle animation. And the log files, what these are a bunch of text files that if you find a bug in Crowbar, send it back to Zek. He's going to want to see these files so that he can determine where the program actually erred out. So if you're reporting a bug, go back to that group page, find the bug report section, and basically throw these into a Dropbox or something like that and send them back to him. Or if they aren't really that big, copy and paste them into your post. Okay, anyway, that's decompiling a model. Let's go back into the folder here. So the SMD we're going to talk about when we get into Blender. The QC file we're going to talk about when we actually start using the model in Blender. I'm going to show you a little secret there, and that kind of thing. For a more complex model, and I'm going to decompile the HWM sniper. So basically all I'm going to do is go browse. HWM models we could never decompile before because the old cannon fodder decompilers didn't work with the newer type models. The cannon fodder decompilers were great during their time, and basically they worked for what we needed to do, but now with the newer type models, they don't work anymore. This is the tool to use. So the HWM models for Source FileMaker live in the TF Movies folder. Okay, so we're going to drill into TF Movies, come down here to Models, Player, HWM, Sniper. This is the one that I want to decompile, and I want to decompile it to my desktop. So I'm going to override the default folder, come in here, back up to my desktop, create a new folder. I'm going to call this one Project Sniper. I'm going to drill into that folder, open it, and I'm going to do that again. Browse, back up to my desktop, find the Project Sniper, drill into it, open it again. I'm going to leave the information here. I'm not working with a Left 4 Dead 2 survivor, so I don't have to apply the fix, and simply decompile. I could actually decompile a complete folder of models if I wanted to. I don't know why I would want to. So anyway, decompile the model, writes all the information out. If I drill into that folder now, I'm going to find all the associated SMDs for that particular model, all the body groups. I'm going to find the VTA file that contains the animation for the facial flexes, the QC. I'm going to find the sniper physics model, which is the actual collision model. And if this model actually had level of detail files, all the level of detail files would be here as well. Level of detail files are the files that are used in a game when the camera is away from an object. The object collapses in on itself so that it doesn't use as many resources. In Source FileMaker, we don't need level of detail files because the model doesn't collapse on itself. Anyway, here in the animations, I'm going to find the ragdoll SMD and the reference SMD. And again, in the actual log files, I'm going to find all the decompile logs that I can use for reporting bugs. So that is pretty much decompiling a model using Crowbar. This is the tool to use. We haven't got to the point where we can actually decompile DMX type models. Any models that you decompile are going to be SMD related source files, which can be loaded into Blender, and we're going to get into Blender in the next session. So basically that's all I can say about Crowbar. Hey gang, Prem Jack here. Welcome to part 3, the amendment to my series on how to decompile a Velp model, get it into Blender, fiddle around with it a little bit, recompile it, and get it back into Source FileMaker as a different model. Okay, so Crowbar. This particular session is going to be on Crowbar, and it was before. As you heard me say, welcome to Part 3, the A version, simply due to the fact that, as I mentioned in the intro and in Part 1, where I showed you where to go and get the models, it looked like Zach McCaw was just on the verge of pushing the button on a new version of Crowbar. Well, I got my videos all done and released them to YouTube probably at the very same instant that he pushed the button on the new release. So my old video was on 0.24, and the newest version of Crowbar out there is 0.27 now. I was hoping that I wouldn't have to redo the video, but when I went and I pulled the actual version down, what I found was, wow, what a change. And man, it's all for the better. So in this particular video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to get it, download it, install it, and use it to decompile a model. Okay, so first off, what we're going to do is we're going to head off to Steam. We're going to go into the community page and head for the home. Come down here to find people and groups. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in there Crowbar tool. And I'll bring up a list of everything related to Crowbar, and basically this is the group that we want to go to, the Crowbar Source Engine Modding Tool group. This is Zach McCaw's little group. Only has 1,670 people as members, and man, there's a lot of people out there using the tool. Join up, that's all I can say. You'll see that I'm not joined here, it's simply due to the fact that I'm on Steam under my alter ego. Anyway, what you do is come down here, click on the download Crowbar link. It'll take you to this particular download page. As I said, most current version is 0.27, and talking with Zach, it looks like he's going to try and put out monthly releases on this tool. This thing is like active, and Zach is really great at doing the updates here. Anyway, to get the tool, it comes down as a 7Z file, which is a compressed file format. Click on the link, it'll take you to the download page, click download, and for ease of use, just put it on your desktop. Save as, and on your desktop. That's how fast it comes down. Okay, we can close out of here for now, and we'll be going back there in a couple of minutes. So here's Crowbar down on my desktop, and to install it, it is this simple. I have 7Z files associated to WinRAR, so all I have to do is right-click on it, and drag it somewhere on my desktop, drop it, and click Extract to. And poof, here's Crowbar. If I drill into the folder, what I'm going to find is a Crowbar exe file and a data folder. You can put this folder anywhere on your computer and create a shortcut to it, and basically it will launch, as long as the Crowbar exe has the data folder in the same folder as the exe file. Okay, so I'm going to delete that little shortcut there. Two ways to launch it through a shortcut, or just double click on Crowbar exe. This is the graphics interface that is now in Crowbar, and I'm going to show you the difference. Oh, come on, stop that. I'm going to show you the difference between this tool and the last version. So let me see, do I still have Crowbar here? Link to my Crowbar, where is it? Crowbar 024. Okay, so here's Crowbar 024, and this is Crowbar 027. Look at the difference. There is a ton of stuff here. Okay, so the layout has changed a little bit. Not only is this a decompiler, but it's also a compiling tool. And if I go into the compiler tab here, look at the difference. The game setups, basically, there were that many before. Look at this. I think he's hit every possible game you can that you can compile a valve model for with this particular version. Okay, so he's also added a feature that I really like, and that's the define bones feature. And when I get into, which means I have to rewrite my entire compiling models in Blender thing completely, because that is such a useful tool for me. Okay, anyway, let's come back here and get a model actually decompiled. To decompile a model using this tool, all you have to do is know where the MDL file lives. Or if you want to decompile complete folders, you can actually decompile folders and subfolders with this thing. So all I want to do is decompile a model, and the model that we're going to decompile is the photo badge that you saw in the intro. So that photo badge lives in Source Filmmaker game. It's a TF2 item, TF2 item. I'm going to drill into TF, come down here to models. It's a player item, so I have to go into the players folder, into items. It's an all-class item, and it's called photo badge. So I just click on one of the files there, type PH, and it should take me right to it. That one right there. So all I have to do is click on that. Now what I can do is I can decompile to the default folder, and what that is going to do is it's going to create a folder called decompiled 0.27 under the all-class folder that I pulled the model out of. I don't want to do that because I don't want to go looking all over my computer looking for models that I've decompiled. So all I'm going to do is override that default by clicking on full path, and I want to put it on my desktop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the browse and just point to my desktop. From there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new folder, and I'm going to call this photo project. I'm going to drill into that folder and click open. So when I push a decompile button, my decompiled files should go right here. Now let's look at some of these options. Oh, there's so many. Okay, so basically the options, QC file. I want to include a QC file. It'll help me when it comes time to create the QC file for the new model that I'm going to create. It's already written. Group into QCI files, I'm not really going to go into. It's a way of taking certain elements of a QC, putting it in a separate file, and then all you do is call those separate QCI files to build your model when it comes to compile time. Because this is such a simple model, I'm not going to go there. Okay, include defined bones. Because the model that we're working with only has one bone, I'm not going to have to worry about that. But if my model had many bones and I start adding bones to the model, then what I need to do, and before I go there, if I start adding bones to a model and I don't associate mesh to them, when I compile a model, the bones that don't have mesh assigned will disappear. What I have to do is I have to actually define all the bones in the model, and there's a way of going about doing that which is above the level of this particular tutorial. Reference mesh. Yes, we want the reference mesh because that's the main mesh of the actual item. Now, if you're working with Left 4 Dead 2 survivors, the right hand has a little glitch in it, and Zek has written this compiler to fix that glitch when you decompile the model. So if you're working with survivors from the Left 4 Dead 2, click that on. And it's good to see that, okay, that's great. There was a little bug in the old version that if I clicked on a add button here, or one of the checkboxes, this would actually go back to the original folder definition, and it looks like that's fixed. Okay. Level of detail mesh files. If the model has level of detail files, you can extract those as well. And what a level of detail file is in a game file, in a game player, if the camera backs away from the player, the model will start collapsing in on itself, so that there isn't as much mesh being displayed, and it frees up resources for models that are far away. The physics model, the physics mesh, what that is the collision model, and we don't really need physics models in Source FilmMaker, so I'm going to click that one off. Vertex animations, this is if the model has facial flexes or any type of flexes that move any of the mesh on the model. And basically you want these things for things like player models, HWMs, you know, that kind of thing. It's all this stuff up here, the eyes and everything else. So basically that's what the VTA file is. Bone animations, if there are embedded sequences in the model, like the idle sequence, ragdoll sequence, there could be others that are actually embedded right into the model. This will pull those animations out and put them into separate SMD files so that you can use them for editing later. And basically it says, something that we didn't have the option to do was either put these in the project folder or put them in a subfolder in an Anims subfolder. I like all my SMDs in the same place so that I can write my QCs quicker. Gives you the option to bring in procedural bones, and what this is QC information on jiggle bones, and basically bring the jiggle bone VRD file into actually I don't know if it writes the VRD file or not, but anyway, make a long story short, the procedure bones are things like jiggle bones, and this will actually write the information to the QC for the jiggle bones. Now if you're downloading folders and subfolders, and I guess what this is it will actually create a new folder for each model that it decompiles. Like I say, this thing was only released yesterday. I haven't had a real good chance to explore all the functions of it. I'm not sure what format for Pt3 importers means. It's something that I'll have to talk to Zek about, but I'm going to check that on just to see what that does. Create log files, yes, and I want debug information in the form of comments in the QC, and I want extra debug information files so that if I do encounter a bug, what I can do is I can fire those files back to Zek, and he can explore them to find out what actually caused the error in my decompile. So that's basically all the stuff that you need to do for decompiling a model. What I do is come down here and I click on decompile. It'll write some information there in the screen here. There's my decompile log, and that used to be on a separate tab altogether, but now it's right here. I can actually walk through and have a quick look and see if there were any errors. I like that. And if I come into my photo projects folder now, I should find all that information and basically my SMD files for the entire model. Okay, so here I've got my log file, I've got unknown bytes text, I've got debug information. If I have a problem with the actual model when I go to bring it into Blender and I think it's a bug, what I can do is I can come back here to Zek's page, go into the discussion area, and right here he has a form set up for bug reporting. Click on that, start a new discussion, set up some sort of a Dropbox or find some way of getting those error files to him, because he's going to want to see those. Now, if you come back into the discussions and just say, I've got a problem, he's not going to look at this. He's looking here at the bug reports. So basically, that's where you need to put anything that you find going wrong with Crowbar. Okay, I've rambled on here for about 20 minutes now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to decompile, because this is the first time I've actually used the tool, I'm going to try and decompile one of the HWM models from the TF Movies folder, just to see how well this thing does. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to browse, I'm going to come back and go into the TF Movies folder, and just a tidbit of information. If you didn't know, Gameplay actually has an HWM model. Come down here to player, see, and basically what those are the HWM models used in the close-up shots for kill cam and things like that. You don't see them in Source FilmMaker because the TF folder has a lower priority than the TF movies folder does, and the models are using the same path and file names as the ones that are in the TF HWM folders. So basically, you're getting the TF movies ones over game player ones. Anyway, just a little bit of information for you. So I'm going to drill into TF movies, models, player, HWM, and I'm going to grab the sniper model. I'm going to come down here, I'm going to go browse, I'm going to go back to my desktop, I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call this Sniper Project. Hit enter. Now this is something that we could never do with the old cannon fodder decompilers, is work with the HWM models. The old compilers just would not decompile them. There's too much new information in them. So, and yeah, the old decompilers were great in their day. They did the job perfectly for what we needed them to do, but when Valve went to pipeline and changed all the file folders and everything else where everything lived, they changed the game cache files from GCF to VPK. They did a whole hockey socket changes that just made the old compilers so hard to work with. We could get them to work if we fiddled with them. Now we've got this tool, and this is it. This is where you need to go, is with this particular tool. Anyway, now that I've got that set up, I'm going to, let's see, I don't need the right-hand fixes. I'm going to leave the physics mesh turned on, and I'm going to place the animation files in the anims folder in this particular case. I'm not going to group into QCIs. I'm not going to include the defined bone, and I'm going to check this one off. I just want to see what that is. Okay, anyway, click on Decompile, and away she goes. Coming into my Sniper Project folder, and here are all the files that I asked for from that particular model. I've got my QC file, I've got the VTA file containing the facial flexes, I've got all the body groups. There are no LOD files here because the HWM models for Source Filmmaker don't use them. Here's my debug information, and up here it created that anims file folder. There's my ragdoll animation and my ref animation. So yeah, it's compiling great. Now, I just want to show you something here on the QC. When it comes time to work with the QC for one of these big models that you've decompiled and it was an HWM type model, if you open up the QC, what you're going to do is you're going to come in here and you're going to find all the SMD, VTA, flex pairs, flexes, and scrolling down here, you're going to find all the flex controllers identified, the local vars all identified. When you get down here into the actual flex assignments, you're going to find a lot of this stuff. What this is, I had a quick conversation with Zach on it, is this is information that is DMX specific, and we haven't gotten to the point where we can actually decompile a model into DMX source format yet. I believe Zach is working on it. When it's going to be available, have no idea, and I'm not pushing him for him because he's doing such a great job with this one. But anyway, that's what all that is. All the primary SMD type relationships or flex assignments have been found. There's over 40 flex assignments here. Like I say, all this stuff is related to DMX specific information. So, but moving on down the QC file, and there's a lot of it. Okay, so body groups, sets up the body groups for us. It sets up all the eye positions and the max deflections. It reads everything it can possibly read out of the model file and writes the QC for you. So it makes QC writing a heck of a lot easier. Hitboxes, bone merges. If I had checked on that defined bones, all the bones would have been defined in the QC. There's the collision joints. There should be some, I don't see them. I thought there were some jiggle bones in this model. I don't see them. I'll have to look at that later. But anyway, that's decompiling a model and the files that are associated to it. We're going to be working with these files in the next sessions. Not the sniper ones, but with the actual little guy. This guy. We'll be working with this and in Blender and getting that model off to Source Filmmaker. Hey guys, Private Jack here. Welcome to part 4 in my series on how to get a static model, decompile it, get it into Blender, edit it a little bit, and send it back to Source Filmmaker as its own model. Last session I said we were going to start using Blender, however I've decided to change up the order a little bit, and we're going to talk a bit about GIMP here. The reason why I want to use this is because when we're in Blender, we're going to want to have some materials for the model that we can use as reference, and Blender does not work with VTF files. So what we're going to do is we're going to use GIMP, and I'm going to show you how to set up the VTF plugin for it. So anyway, let's get started. Blender uses all different types of image files that you can load into it to use to dress up or skin your model. However, VTF is not one of them. Now, Valve uses VTF image formats for their materials, and because of that, we need to convert them back into a usable format that can be used in Blender. I particularly prefer PNGs and TAGA files. You guys can use BMPs, JPEGs, PNGs, or TAGA files. It's up to you. Could use VTF Edit for doing this process. However, VTF Edit will not allow you to change the textures. It just converts files. So rather than using the VTF Edit tool for this particular purpose, I would prefer using something that I can actually edit the file with, and that's GIMP. And because GIMP has a VTF plugin, we can actually load the VTFs into GIMP to so that we can edit them directly. Okay, Okay, so GIMP, I told you where to go and get it in session 1. Download it. It's an exe installer. Basically, do the install, and then head off to the webpage that I told you where to get the GIMP plugin for VTFs. Make sure you download the proper one for the actual operating system that you're using. In my case, I'm on an x64 type bit computer, therefore I brought down the x64 bit plugin. Brought it down and put it on my desktop, and I'm going to drill into it using WinRAR. Now, this comes down in a zip format, and Windows File Explorer actually has a small decompression tool or extracting tool for zip files built into it, but I prefer using WinRAR. So I'm going to drill into the actual zip file. Inside the zip file, you're going to find the README file. View the README file, and it's going to tell you exactly how to install this thing into GIMP. So basically, following the tool, what we're going to do is we're going to open up File Explorer. We're going to go into Programs, Files. Actually, mine installs in Program Files, GIMP. There it is, because I'm using the 64-bit version. And come on, stop. There we go. I'm going to drill into GIMP. I'm going to find the lib folder, drill into GIMP again, O2, and here's where the plugins live. So basically all I'm going to do is open up that folder, and you can actually see that I already have this set up in my GIMP. Where is it? File VTF, File VTF. There it is there, and the other one was way down here, VTF lib DLL, right there. All I did was took those two files, and dropped them into this folder. So left click, drag, and drop. Missing from your computer here. Drag and drop. There we go. Replace the two files. Yes. What I tried to do was actually replace the Goldern file, and I didn't want to do that. So, depending on the levels of security you have set up on your computer, you may have to be an administrator to do this. Continue, and done. Okay, I can now exit out of that, exit out of this. Now, the first time I try to launch GIMP after adding a new program or font or anything, a new add-on or that kind of thing, GIMP takes forever to load up. So all you can do is sit there and wait for it to finish. Launch GIMP. Because I replaced those two files, this is going to take a little while for me to actually load up. It might take you a heck of a lot longer for it to actually happen. Okay, so now that GIMP is loaded, all I need to do to get the materials for this particular model that we're working with is drill into the open. I've already got it set there. Okay, let's go into... good. I have a shortcut already set up. I'm going to come back up to Game, go down to TF, drill into the Materials folder, rearrange it by name, come down here to Models, Player, Items, All Class, and what I'm looking for is the photo badge. So let's see if this works. P again. No. PH, photo badge. There it is there. That's the one that I want. And I also want the photo badge decal. And I know this off the top of my head. I'll show you how you find that information out when we actually get into Blender. So I'm going to open those two files, and I'm going to come in here to Layers. Select the first one, come in here to Layers, right-click on the badge itself, and I'm going to disable the layer mask because all I want is the primary main layer of the actual skin. I'm going to go File, Export as Export, and I'm going to put that into that project folder that we're working with, the photo project, and I'm going to rename the file extension to PNG. Hit Enter. I'm going to use the default settings for the actual PNG file and export. Now I'm going to do the same thing to the decal. Right-click, disable the layer mask, File, Export. I can now go into my recently used because it keeps record of the folders that I use. Go into the photo project, change the extension from VTF to PNG, hit enter, export. So that now gives me, in my project folder, the two PNG files that I'm going to require for my particular project. And that's using GIMP to convert VTF files to an image format that's usable in Blender. Hey gang, Private Jack here. Welcome to part 5 of my series on how to take a valve static model, decompile it, get it into Blender, fiddle around with it a little bit, export it back to Source Filmmaker as its own model. So in this session, what we're going to do is we're going to cover the installation of Blender Source Tools. If you don't have Blender Source Tools installed, then you're not going to be able to import the models that we've decompiled using Crowbar. So a lot of people want to see this done with the Steam version of Blender, and that is basically the version that we're going to use. First thing is that if this is the first time you're using Blender Source Tools, you're going to have to install, or you're going to have to download it so that you have it to install. And back in episode 1, I showed you how to go about finding it and basically downloading it. Now, Blender Source Tools, as of 2.5.2, don't work with anything below Blender 2.74. So if you're trying to install this particular tool to 2.69, it's not going to work. What you're going to have to do is go back and find a previous version of Source Tools or upgrade to 2.74. Download it, just click on the download button and save it to your desktop. And that's how fast it comes down. It's already down and on my desktop right here. Okay, so Blender. If you haven't got Blender already and you want the Steam version, all you have to do is go into the Steam store and find, type up here Blender and find it. There's a little free button here that comes up. Click on that and it will install. When Blender installs to your hard drive, it will install into the Steam directory under Steam Apps, Common, Blender. And here it is here. Already Blender has gone through 2 dates since it was introduced to Steam, and I can tell you that it actually does do the updates. So if you're concerned about that, Blender in Steam updates automatically. Okay, now that that's done, we need to install Blender source tools into Blender, and I'm going to launch the Steam version. So I come here to Library, go into my Softwares folder, or Softwares tab, and this is where the launch button is actually installed. So click on Launch, and here's Blender. To install Blender source tools will insert itself into the Scenes Property panel. It's just so that you can see that I don't have it already installed. Here it is, okay? To install Blender source tools, I've got it down here on my desktop, and I don't have to unzip the file. I don't have to do anything with that download. So I'm going to expand that. I'm going to come up here into File. I'm going to go to User Preferences, and on the User Preferences panel here, I'm going to select Add-ons. Now I'm going to actually type in Blender, just so that you can see that I don't have Blender source tools already installed, and it's sitting in the background just waiting for me to do something with. When I install Blender source tools, it's going to insert itself into App Data, Roaming, Blender Foundation, Blender 2.75 Scripts Add-ons. As you can see here, there's nothing here right now that says anything about Valve source models or anything else like that, because I haven't got the plugin installed. Okay, let's get the plugin installed now. So, from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on Install from File. Now I'm going to point the browser at my desktop and find that zip file that I just downloaded. I'm going to select it and click on Install from File. What that will do is it'll create a new panel button here that is unchecked. And if you look over here in my Properties panel, it still isn't here. As soon as I click on that little checkbox there, Blender Source Tools will insert itself into the Scenes Property panel. Now, if I was to close everything out down now and relaunch Blender, the Source Tools would disappear. And the reason for that is because I have to tell Blender that this tool is going to be available to me anytime I launch it. And the way I do that is by clicking on the Save User setting. So just to show you, I'm going to close it down without clicking on that. I'm going to relaunch Blender. I'm going to go into that Scenes Property panel, and Blender Source Tools is gone. To get it back, I come back into File, User Preferences, type in Blender, and as you can see that the plugin is still available, it's just not turned on. So I click it on. This time I'm going to save the user settings, and I'm going to close out of Blender. I'm going to relaunch Blender, and this time when I go back into that Properties panel, I will find that Blender Source Tools is available after doing the launch. I don't have to do anything else. Coming back into that Add-ons folder, I can now see that Blender Source Tools has actually inserted itself into that Apps Data, Roaming, Blender Foundation, Blender 2.75 Scripts Add-on folder. This is kind of a good thing because now when I float between versions, and I'm going to go into my install of the blender.org version, Blender reads the configuration files from that apps data folder. So if I come in here now and I look in my Scenes Property panel, I'm going to find that any of the add-ons, the custom add-ons that I've added that are in that particular add-ons folder are available, and it doesn't matter which version of Blender I use. When it comes time for updates and Blender updates through Steam, all I have to do is come back into 2.75, pick up my config and scripts folders, and copy them into the new version that shows up in here. And my plugins and add-ons and all the rest of that good stuff will be available in the new version that downloads. Okay, Blender Source Tools is actively monitored and changed from time to time. Now, if you have Blender Source Tools already installed in Blender, and there has been an update, and you should always check for updates regularly, all you have to do now is you don't have to go back to that Blender Source Tool site. All you have to do is click on this little button here that says Check for Updates, and if there's an update available, Blender will actually update the tool or tell you that you have the latest version there. If there has been an update, you may have to actually close out Blender and restart it in order for the update to take. Well, that's one of the things I don't like about the Steam version is that if I want to have more than one version of Blender running at the same time, I have to actually go back into Blender folder, right-click on the Blender exe file, and run a new session of it. Or what I can do is I can come down here onto the actual icon that's on the desktop and click Blender, and then a new version will load. But if I try to launch it through the client, and I already have a version that's launched through the client, it won't let me do that. Anyway, that's Blender Source Tools installed in a nutshell, and with that, we're going to move on now to work with the actual models that we've decompiled and get them back into Source FileMaker. Okay gang, Bud Jack here. Welcome to part 6 of my series on how to decompile a static model, get it into Blender, fiddle around with it a little bit, and get it back into Source FileMaker. So, in the previous sessions, what we did is we went to Steam and we downloaded Source FileMaker. We then found a Steam game that we wanted to add the assets to Source FileMaker for, and used GCFScape to port those assets into Source FileMaker. Remember, Source FileMaker does not reach out into other game files. It has to have its own copy of the actual assets in order to use them. From there, we found a model that we wanted to edit a little bit and use the Crowbar Decompile tool to decompile the model, put it into a project folder. From there, we went and we grabbed the VTF files for that particular model because Blender can't use VTF files, and converted them into PNG files, and we'll see how that works out in a few minutes. Next thing we did, we went to Steam and we actually downloaded Blender. From there, we went to the Blender Source Tools webpage, downloaded Blender Source Tools, and installed that. From there, what I did is I went to my library in the softwares section and right-clicked on Blender and created a desktop shortcut to Blender so that I can now just launch it from my desktop. So let's get Blender started. Okay, this is the Steam version of Blender. It's no different from the one that you would download from blender.org, other than the fact that it's an install and it actually installs to your Steam folders. To clear the splash screen, just click anywhere on the screen. If you install Blender Source Tools properly, if you come into the File menu and down to Import, somewhere in this list of files that Blender is able to import, you're going to find Source Engine, SMD, VTA, DMX, or QC. This means that Blender Source Tools will import any one of those 4 formats. I'm going to turn on screencast keys here so that you can see the key presses that I make. And this isn't an actual add-on to Blender anymore. It used to be there. What I had to do is actually I had to go back into previous versions of Blender and grab the PY file and put it into 2.75 so that it would actually do this. It's a custom install. Okay, so working with, let's see. I've already done this video once. It was 31 minutes long. When I came to render the video, I found that I'd left my mic turned off. Therefore, I'm redoing it and actually have decided that I'm going to break this down into a couple of parts. In this session, we're just going to cover the actual import of valve models. So let's get the actual scene set up. First thing I want to do is I want to get rid of this default cube. I'm going to right-click on the cube, press X, and delete it. Next thing I want to do is I want to move the camera and the light to a new layer. So I'm going to right-click on the camera, hold down the Shift key, and right-click on the lamp, press M, and move it down here to the last layer. That now makes my scene clean and I can see what I'm doing. Okay, as I said before, my purpose here is not to teach you how to use Blender, but to show you the process that I use to actually do this kind of stuff. So if you don't know how to use Blender, there's plenty of tutorials out there. BlenderGuru.com, BlendToots.com, and if you go into the actual Steam community, things are actually picking up in the community. There's lots of guides, lots of videos, all the rest of that good stuff. So have a look there. Okay, now that the scene is cleaned up, what we're going to do is we're going to put the cursor in the center of the scene. Let's say it's way up here. Wherever that cursor is where a model's origin point is going to spawn. So I want it down here, dead center of the stage. What I'm going to do is I'm going to push down Shift, S, and move the cursor to center. That puts the cursor in the center. There's another little thing that needs to be addressed here, and that's how the 3D cursor acts. If you go into File, User Preferences, and go to Interface, there's a checkbox here called Cursor Depth and Auto Depth. They're usually turned on by default, and what that does is it causes that 3D cursor, if you want to move the cursor around and put it inside a model, it will not penetrate closed mesh. So basically what you have to do in order to penetrate mesh, turn that function off. If you turn that function off, don't forget to save your user set. Okay, now that that's done, let's get a model in. First model that we're going to bring in is that actual photo badge that we want to work with. And the way that I do that is I simply click on File, go to my import selection, come down here to Source Engine, click on that. Notice down here there's a whole bunch of options. Okay, you can actually preserve the SMD polygons and normals, and what that's going to do is it's going to cause a rough model to be imported. You can import any animations. You can reset your camera to, or make a new camera at the origin point. You can append models to the existing armature. You can validate the bones of something else that you bring into the existing target, or you can make a new armature for it. For this particular case, because it's the first item in, we're just going to append a target. You can change the up axis as well. Most models made for TF are built on the y-axis. Y-axis is up. The reason for that is a lot of them come out of Maya, and Maya's default axis up is Y. So let's turn that on to Y. Rotation method, E-ruler, bone shape, sphere. I can change that to default, and I won't get those little round bones that come in when you actually bring in a valve model. We'll leave it at sphere for now so you can see what I mean. Next thing I want to do is I want to point to that folder that I have my project in. So it's on my desktop, photo project, and basically this is the file that I want to bring in. So I want to bring in that reference SMD. So I select it and press import. Remember I said most valve models are built on the y-axis? Well, there's a perfect example of it. Okay, now, this is the model that we want to use. There's another way of actually importing this, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to the sniper. Remember we decompiled the sniper? Okay, so, File, Import, SMD. I'm going to change this to the sniper now. And remember we have all these different body groups, okay? If I bring in the sniper reference and just bring that in, I'm going to hit the sniper, and he's missing arms, he's missing, his hat, he's missing all kinds of weird and wonderful stuff. The reason for that is because they are a separate body group. Now, what I could do is I could actually bring those in one at a time, and remember I showed you that append to target? Well, let's bring in his gloved hand. I select that model, leave that set at append to target. Because I brought it in with Z-axis up, he's lying on the ground, so I'm going to leave that where it is, and I'm going to import that. What that did is it automatically took the bones that were in that body group and matched it up with the bones that were already there. Okay, so basically there is the sniper. He now has his arm, and I could go through and do that for the entire model. Build his hat, build everything else. if I come over into my Blender source tools and come down here to exportables, what I'm going to find is that I have individual objects now. Excuse me. So there's the sniper ref, then the sniper gloved arm group. I could bring in his hand group without the glove on it, and I could bring in his hat, and these would start building up because they're individual objects. Right now I'm going to select everything, and I'm going to delete it again. I'm going to go into ortho view by pressing numpad 5. I'm going to go into front view by pressing numpad 1, and I'm going to import that sniper again. Import SMDs. This time what I'm going to do is I'm going to import the ref group. Oh, I forgot to change that. Let's do that again. Okay, cursor to center. File, import SMDs. I'm going to leave that pen to target, change that to the y-axis, and import that reference mesh again. Okay, so now he's standing on the floor the way he should be, and here he is. Right now, this model does not have any shape keys. In other words, there's no facial flexes in here at all. Okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to append the VTA to the model. The way I do that is I do a file, import, SMD. This time I'm going to select the VTA. I'm going to change my up axis to Y because that's what I did when I imported the reference model. And I'm going to leave it append to target, import. This one's going to take a little bit longer because what it's doing now is it's going through and it's comparing mesh, existing mesh, to the actual model. And here, what you see is you've got arrows, you've got quivers, you've got hats, arms, and everything else. But what it's saying here is these little dots are actual vertices that cannot find a match within the model. And if I select the model itself, what I now find is that I have a whole bunch of shape keys. And these are the actual meshes, the shape keys that form the mouth movements. Okay? These visible dots here, jumping jeepers creepers. These visible dots here, what I can do is I can delete them because they're not associated to anything. And that just leaves me with the leftover shape keys, 4 that have actually matched. Now for each of these shape keys, what I have to do is I actually have to walk through each and every one of them and make sure that the vertices that are in the model move the way that they're supposed to. So that's another long process. Okay, now that we see how VTAs work, let's do another import. This time what I'm going to do is I'm going to go File, Import, SMD. I'm going to change the y-axis, or the up axis to Y, and this time I'm going to load the QC. It takes a little bit longer because what it's doing is it's combining everything that's here and actually loading it into the model. Okay, so what we see here now, if we go into the exportables, we have the ragdoll animation, and it's on a armature. We have the sniper's arrow group right there, the forearm body group, and is that the one with glove or without? That's the one without glove. We've got the glove group, which is in the same location, the hat, and we have the physics model. Source FilmMaker does not require a physics model, so we can actually delete that right off the bat and see what we're left over with. So here's the entire sniper now, completely built in scene based on the QC. Here again are the leftover vertices that didn't match from the VTA file. We can delete those right here. And if we select the model and go into the actual object data, we should have all the shape keys because it loaded the VTA file at the same time. Where's the mouth open? Jaw open. There we go. So there's the jaw open, and basically the lips open. Where is it? Slide jaw left, slide jaw right. We have, what, 140 some odd, 274 shape keys associated with this particular model right now. Not all of them are used when it comes time for compile. If we come down here and select that, only 54 of these 274 shape keys are actually going to be placed into the model. The rest are all corrective shapes, and that's what a corrective shape is something that is used to build another shape with. Just to make it simple. So this model will only have 54 flexes when it actually compiles. Anyway, so there's the glove group. If I actually hide that now, there's the arm group, hide that. There's the ref model, hide that. The quiver, hide that. The hat, hide that. That was the tooth hat, and this is the regular hat, hide that. And the arrows. I'm left over with one skeleton, and basically there is your model. That's the buildup of an actual valve model. Armature, and a whole bunch of objects that move with the model. So that is importing models into Source FilmMaker, importing models into Blender using Blender source tools. Next session, we're actually going to go in and we're going to start editing up that photo picture so that we can get it back into Source FilmMaker. I had to show you this portion of it in order for you to understand where I was headed. Private Jack here, welcome to my series on how to get a valve model, decompile it, put it into Blender, fiddle with it a bit, and throw it back into Source FilmMaker. This is part 7 of the series, and we're actually going to start working with a model in Blender. Taking this long to get this far. Okay, so anyway, let's get Blender started. We've got source tools installed. Click anywhere to clear the splash screen, and let me get shape keys going here. Or not shape keys, but screencast keys. Okay. 40. So any of the keys, most of the keys that I press will show up down here in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. Get rid of this menu now, and let's get started. So the first thing I want to do is I want to get rid of the default cube. So I right-click on it, press X, delete, select the camera, hold down the Shift key, select the lamp, M, move that down to the last layer. My cursor's sitting way the heck out here in space. I want that on the center. Shift S to bring up the cursor move screen and move it to the center. Now my cursor's in the center of the screen, and any model that I spawn is going to spawn on the cursor. Remember, I'm here only to show you my process. I'm not here to teach you how to use Blender. There's plenty of tutorials out there. BlenderGuru.com, BlendTuts.com, and in the actual Steam Blender community, lots of guides and videos there. Okay, so let's get that photo badge loaded. Select File, Import, SMD, point to the project folder, and let's load up the, before we do that, let's change the up axis to Y, and load up the photo badge reference SMD. So here's our badge now in Blender. Okay, this particular model is a miss item that's used on all classes. The thing only has one bone, okay, and that's the metal bone. And what else? It's currently sitting so that the origin point is on the floor, on the bone. And we'll talk about origin points in a couple of minutes. First thing I want to do, though, is I want to give this thing some skin, so it gives me some reference as to what the thing looks like. The way that I do that is I select the object, and I place it in edit mode by pressing Tab. I come over to the Materials panel, and here I can see, and remember I told you back in the GIMP session I'd show you where I found out the names of the actual materials that were being used? Well, here it is right here. So, went to TF, Materials, Models, Players, Items, All Class Photo Badge, picked up that particular All Class, picked up the VTF for Photo Badge, and same for the Badge Deco. So that's how I knew what materials I needed to load. First thing I'm going to do with this, though, is I'm going to rename these materials because I don't want them to be confused with the actual materials that are being used on the original model. So in here, I'm going to name this one, P Badge. And case doesn't really matter, but it looks better if it's all the same case. And this one here I'm going to call P Badge Decal. So I selected P Badge Decal. Now it's important that you realize these material names are exactly what you have to call your VMTs when it comes time to writing VMTs, and I'll go into that when we start doing that. Okay, now that I've got those materials renamed, what I want to do is materials renamed, I want to assign a texture to them. So I'm going to select the first one, click on the Textures property panel, come down to New, it's going to be an image or a movie, come down here, click, it's going to be associated to a UV, click on Open, and go into the Photo Project folder and pick up that first PNG, the Photo Badge PNG that we created, and I'm going to open that. Now I'm going to go into the Materials panel, select the P Badge Decal, come back into the Textures panel, and as you can see, there's no textures assigned to that material. Click on New, it's going to be an image or a movie, and it's going to be associated to UVs, and I'm going to click on Open, go into that project folder again, and select the Photo Badge Decal, and open that image. These two materials now have textures assigned to them, but if I go into object mode on the object, they don't show up on the object. Even if I turn on shading, and to do that, what I have to do is open up the menu here. I could do that by pulling it over or by pressing N. Come down here, find shading, expand that group, turn on textured solids, and nothing should happen. All it should happen is they should turn white, because what they're using right now is the Blender default material for that particular, the Blender texture for that particular material. Okay, so how do I get those ping files to actually show up on my model? What I have to do now is I'm going to press N to close off this menu, come up here to, and you see this little perforated arrow type thing at the top of the screen here? I'm going to left click on that and pull it off to the side to split my screen. From there, now I've got two screens that show the 3D viewer. Down here, I select the button here, I come up and I go into the UV image editor and launch that. This is the UV image editor. Come back into the 3D screen, put the model back into edit mode, pressing Tab. Using the Materials property panel, I select the first material and click on Select. This will light up any vertex that is associated with that particular material. Because we've decompiled a model that's already existing, it should already have a UV map. And that is what this is the UV map. Now, to get this UV map to use this texture that we assigned to it, once the UV map is loaded, come down here, and where it says New, click the up and down arrow keys beside it, and load up the ping picture that we associated to that material. The model now has that material, that texture assigned to that material placed on the actual model. To do the other one, model in edit view, deselect the first one so that nothing is selected, or what you can do is press A a few times until nothing is selected. Select the next material, press select, and this is the UV map for that particular mesh in the model. Again, come down here and press the up-down arrow key and assign the second texture to that material. And there is the photo badge now colored in Blender. So now I have a pretty good reference as to what this badge is actually going to look like. Okay, from there, where do we want to go? Well, we want to edit the model a bit. So let's go into front-on view, come back into ortho mode. And the first thing I want to do is I want to move this model so that the base of it is sitting on the floor. The x-axis is the actual floor. So I'm going to grab the model. Actually, let's do it this way. I'm going to grab the model on the z-axis by pressing G and then Z. And I'm going to move the model up in object mode and place it on the floor. Now, place it just like that, because this back photo I'm going to get rid of. Okay, now that that object is on the floor, I'm going to go into side-on view. The object origin point moved at the same time. Now, the origin point is important simply due to the fact that when you compile your model, the origin point is going to form the base for the root transform bone in SFM. So I need to move that origin point back down to the floor. Or if I spawn this model, what's going to happen is this model is going to drop back down to the floor again, just like it was before I moved it, like that. There, okay. The way that I can move the origin, there's two ways I can move the origin point. I can either come back into my menu here and come up to my location transform menu, and I can see that I've moved that up 4.7 Blender units. If I come into the object menu item here and go to apply and select location, that will make the origin point for this particular model 0, and it moves the origin point back down here. The other way of doing that, I'm going to control Z out of that to back things up. The other way I can do it is I can actually move my 3D cursor, Shift S, to the center, and I can use Set Origin in the other transform menu on the left-hand side of the 3D viewer. I can get rid of this, I don't need this anymore. What I'm doing is I'm grabbing that little perforated thing up there at the top again with the left mouse button, and as soon as I move it into the other screen, if the screens are the same size and I get that arrow, it will actually close that screen. Okay, on this side is the other transform menu, and it's the tools menu, and I can turn it on and off by pressing T. By moving the cursor to the center, I can come in here now into my tools menu, select the set the origin point to the 3D cursor, and that will move the origin point back down to the center, so that my location now is 0, 0, 0, 0. My rotations are 0, 0, 0, 0. Everything is great and good to go. Front view, side view, my origin point is where I want it, and my bone should still, hopefully, be up here somewhere. We'll find out that in a minute. Okay, metal bone. Oh, looks like it moved. It moved the metal bone. Okay, not a problem. 3, okay. Now, let's say I want the metal bone to be up here at the top. Let's put it right in the center of the actual object now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go into edit mode, select the object by left-clicking on it, go into edit mode by pressing tab. I'm going to select the entire model by pressing A a couple of times. I'm going to move my cursor, Shift S, to selected. And let's see, that didn't do what I wanted it to do. The cursor moved a little bit higher. The reason why is I've got more mesh up here than I have down here, and it figures that this is the center medium point for the entire mesh. What I want is it in here. So if I go and press Z, I can go into wireframe mode. And what wireframe mode allows me to do is see through the mesh so that I can select individual vertices. Okay, so I want that one, that one, that one, and that one. And that should just be the two overlapping pictures that are, no, it might not be. Let's pick up that one as well. I'm holding down the Shift key while I'm pressing the left mouse button to select vertices. Okay, now that I have that selected, what I'm going to do is I'm going to press Control L, and that should light up those two pieces of mesh. Now if I press Shift S and move it to selected, the cursor comes more into the center of where I want it. But again, because there's more mesh up here than there is down here, it still thinks the medium point is here. Go into front view, and I'm just going to move that down a little bit more. There. Okay. Now that my cursor is in the center, and I'm going to move my cursor back to the Z-axis, right there. Okay, now that that's pretty much center, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come out of edit mode. I'm going to select the bone, and because that bone is so small, it's hard to see. Right there. I think I got it. Yeah, I did. 3. I'm going to move that bone to that point there. But if I do it in edit mode, watch what happens. Selection to cursor, the whole model moves. Reason for that is that this mesh is weighted to that particular bone. And that bone is controlling everything in the model. So let's back out of that. But I still want that bone to move up here to that center point. How do I do it? Basically, all I have to do is go into edit mode on the bone, make sure that the whole bone is selected, which it is. Shift S and move selection to cursor. My bone is now located here, and the bone origin point remained on the floor where I need it to be. So now if I actually compile this model, the model will sit on the floor, and the actual bone will be here, and there will be a root transform bone formed on the origin point. Okay, I want that bone to be up here, but let's get rid of some of this mesh first. I don't want all this mesh in this photograph that we're creating. So I'm going to tab out of edit mode for now. I'm going to leave that bone right where it is for now, select the mesh again, and go back into edit mode on the mesh tab. Okay, I don't need the safety pin, so I'm going to select points on the safety pin and press Ctrl-L to select the pin. I have the whole pin selected, and by pressing X and removing all the vertices, that pin will disappear. It's gone. It's no longer part of the model. I don't want this back photograph either, so I'm going to select a couple of points on that back photograph, Ctrl-L, and delete that. X, vertices, it's gone. That leaves me with just that front photograph that I want to work with. Coming back out of wire mode by pressing Z, I can see what I've left over with, and it looks pretty crappy. But we're going to use GIMP to fix up these textures a little bit later. But as it stands right now, that's pretty much the way that I want this particular model to look. But I want it closer to the Z axis so that it will lie on the floor, or stand on the floor, so that if I lie it down, the back is going to lie flat on the floor. To do that, I'm going to select all the mesh, Ctrl-L. I'm going to grab it on the Y axis and pull it back to the Z axis, so that, more or less like that. Now I don't want this corner to puncture into a table or to fall down, to fall through an object. So I'm going to go back into 3 mode, and with these vertices selected, not that one, just these 2, back into that mode, I'm going to pull those 2 vertices so that they're even with the floor, or the wall, or whatever. Like that. And these 2 vertices, I'm going to do the same because they actually puncture the floor. I don't want these 2, so I'm going to deselect them, select those 2, and just move them like that. Let's have a look at the entire model now. So I've got a little bit of curvature to the actual model, and nothing will actually puncture through 3. That one will. Let's pull those a little bit. There we go. There. Now looking at this model, nothing should actually puncture that floor, or wall, or whatever you want to call it. Working with models is a lot of spinning and turning just to see how things look. Okay, tab out of edit mode. Let's go and grab that bone again. Right there, I can either try and find something small like that, or what I can actually do is come over to the properties panel, and here in the model info, I can expand hierarchy and select items that I want to select just by clicking on them. So here I've selected the mesh, there I've selected the bone, and I'm going to put the bone back into edit mode. I can either do it this way or use the tab key. Now that particular bone, I want to actually sit up here at the top of the model. And I want it to sit in between these 2 points here that are actually touching the wall. So, take the model back into edit mode. I select that vertex and that vertex. Shift, cursor to selected. That's exactly where I want that bone. 3. Come over here, select my bone. Put it in edit mode. Shift, selection cursor. So now my bone is actually way up here. And I think that is going to do it. Origin point is here. Origin point for the object is in the same place. You don't want to have origin points for 2 different objects in a different place. If you have this happen, what's going to happen is your model is going to deform improperly, and it's going to totally mess up. So what you want is cursor to center. You want your origin points in the same place. There we go. Now I'm going to select the whole model, and just to make sure that the origin points are in the same place, what this is in object mode. I have the armature and the model selected. I'm going to make sure my cursor is in the center, and set my origin to the 3D cursor. Perfect. This model, as far as I'm concerned, is now ready for export. But before we export it, what we're going to do is we're going to switch modes, and we're going to go into GIMP, and we're going to make the materials for this so that we can make sure that the model is going to look proper when we actually export it and compile it. So for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to save my project, and I'm going to put it in that photo badge project folder, and I'm going to call it photo badge Pt1. And if you see here that, oh no, wrong folder, photo project, there we go. I'm going to call it photo badge Pt1, and save it. Exit out of Blender, just to make sure it took. Let's launch Blender again. If I come here to File, Open Recent, right there. There it is. There's the project that we're working on. Okay, so we can close Blender now. One thing about Blender, save often, save always, save whenever you possibly can, simply due to the fact that Blender has a tendency to crash sometimes. And it's hard to recover from crashes if you haven't got autosaves and that kind of thing set up. Okay guys, Private Jack, welcome to part 8 of my series on how to take a valve model, decompile it, get it into Blender, fiddle around with it a little bit, and get it back into Source FilmMaker. In this session, what we're going to do is we're going to look at GIMP and creating the new skins for our model that we're working with. First off, to do this, what we're going to do is we're going to need a reference for our skins that we can use to determine the scale that they have to be to get them to fit properly on the model. So what we're going to do is we're going to launch Blender. And of course, I've already got it running, so let's kill that session. We're going to launch Blender, open our project, and I can do it right here from the recent files on the splash screen. So here's our picture, and this is the thing that we want to edit. And we want to create a UV reference for this particular picture that we can use in GIMP. So up here, I'm going to grab that corner again, and I'm going to split the screen. I'm going to kill off these menus here. So whatever screen I have my mouse over is the active screen in Blender. So T to turn that off, N to turn that off, T to turn that off, and N to turn that off. I'm going to come down here and I'm going to change this to the UV image editor. And let's see, from there I'm going to right click on the object and put it into edit mode. I'm going to open up my materials panel. I'm going to select the first material and click on select to select the mesh. So this is the mesh that we have left over from that original model that we were playing with. And if you remember, we've got all these burn marks and back marks and everything else. We don't want that. We just want a pure white texture to frame our picture with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hover my mouse over the UV editor and press A to select all the mesh. Come down here to the menus bar and select UVs. And I'm going to export the UV layout. Looking over here, I have a whole bunch of options that I can play with. I can change the image type to whatever I want, EPS, SVG, or PNG. And let's see, I can change the size. And for this, I'm going to want a texture that is 1024 by 1024. Valve VFTs must be scaled to the power of 2, meaning that the size of the model can be 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 2056, or 256, 512, 1024, 2048, and then 4K, yada yada yada, all the way up. But the scale must be to the power of 2. I can differentiate those scales like 1024 by 512, or 2048 by 1024, or 1024 by 64, whatever. But the actual dimensions have to be to the power of 2. For the actual opacity of this particular UV, I want to set that to 1 so that it's 100% opaque. That way I can use this image, use the backgrounds of this image to make selection easier. So I'm going to set that to 1. And now I'm just going to export a PNG file. And I'm going to call this pbadge_UV, ping, and export UV layout. Now what I'm going to do is deselect that particular mesh, go down to the next material and select that. I'm going to hit A over the UV editor to select mesh so that it's all selected, and do the same thing. UV, export UV layout, make sure that my image size is 1024 by 1024, and that my opacity is 1. Come up here, change the file name to, I don't know, Decompile_UV. Hit enter and export the UV layout. And I'm putting this back into that photo projects folder. Export, and there we go. So now that that's done, I haven't changed anything in the model. I can just exit Blender, and now I can load GIMP. Before I load GIMP, these are the 4 pictures that I want to use as my skins for that particular model. And now I load GIMP. Okay, now that GIMP's loaded, the first thing I want to do is I want to load all these pictures up, and I want them to be individual instances in GIMP. So file open, and I'm going to open the badge UV, I'm going to open up Deco UV, and because I can't really float between folders and make selections, I'm going to open those 2 first. So there they are. Then I'm going to go back to my desktop, file open, and back to my desktop, and I'm going to pick up these 4 pictures and open them. Okay, so there are the pictures that I want to put on the Deco screen, and I want to repaint the actual photo frame so that it's pure white, and basically that's all I want to do with it. So first thing I'm going to do is select the frame instance. I'm going to change my color palette to white. I'm going to come up here and I'm going to grab the select by color tool, and I'm going to click on the transparent section of this particular picture. From there, I'm going to select and invert the selection so that now this area here is all selected. From there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select a brush. Over here, I'm going to change the brush type to a solid, and I'm going to change the size so I'm not painting all day. And then, let's see, back into the layers, I'm going to create a new layer by right-clicking on the layer and creating a new layer, and I'm going to make it transparent. Say OK to that. Make sure that layer is selected, and start painting. Now I could sit here and add little lines and make an outline on this thing, but for this particular tutorial, it's not about the quality of the model, it's how it's actually done. So with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off this UV layer so that only this layer is visible, and File, Export, and put it back in that folder as Pbadge, new. It's a ping file. I'm going to export that, and there we go. Okay, next what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the deco layer, or the deco picture. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go back into my Select by Color tool. I'm going to select the transparent layer, and I'm going to inverse the selection. Invert. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on one of the pictures. That didn't work. Why didn't that work? Come back here. That's why it didn't work. First off, I'm going to select that picture, and I'm going to edit, copy the picture. Come back to this layer, this picture, and I'm going to edit and paste. There we go. Now, can I do this? I should be able to move that selection around within the actual selected layer. And if I find that it isn't quite small enough, I should still be able to edit or scale that pasted layer. And I want to make sure that my proportional editing is turned on. And I want the height to be 1024. I'm going to apply that scale. I'm going to go back, I'm going to select picture and move it around so that I don't have any transparencies left over, just like that. And that looks like it's good enough for me. Now what I can do is I can actually create a new layer, and what I'm going to do is make sure that, select the transparency, invert the selection, click on the pasted layer, and what I want to do is I want to scale this layer, auto crop. That's what I want. I want to auto crop it to the selected area. And I don't think that worked. Okay, come back in here, turn that off, select that. Come on, stop playing around with me. There we go. Do the inversion. Come up here and make sure that's selected, and layer, crop to selection. That's what it is. There we go. So now I have that actually sitting inside the actual area that is going to be displayed on the picture when I bring it back. I'm going to do the same thing to the other pictures. So I'm going to turn that off. I'm going to pick up this one. I'm going to edit, copy. I'm going to come back to this one, and I'm going to edit, paste as a new layer. So there we have it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually move this picture around, and I think the rule of thirds is good, like that. And I'm going to layer, crop to selection. Here we go. And again with the next one, edit, copy, back into this, right click, edit, paste as new layer, grab my move tool, move it around a little bit. Now this is a little bit bigger than what I want it to be, so I'm going to grab the scale layer, the scale tool. I'm going to click on the layer. It's not going to let me do it now, is it? Cancel, cancel. Let's delete this layer. Go back into this picture, edit, copy, come back over here, edit, paste as, paste into, paste. Let's just paste it for now. Okay, so this is a little bit bigger than what I want it to be, and because it's a floating selection, I should be able to scale it like so. Make sure the proportional editing is turned on, and let's just scale it down a little bit. Don't want it too small so that it falls outside the selection area. And in the scale mode, I can pick up on the center and move this around a little bit more, and I think that might be good right there. Scale it. I'm going to now to new layer. There we go. And the final one is, of course, the Medic Wolf. Edit, copy, in here, edit. Oh, I know what I forgot to do here. I forgot to scale that, or crop it. We'll do that in a sec. Paste. Why am I not seeing you now? Delete that one. Go back and do that again. Edit, copy, come back into here, edit, paste into. Hate it when a plan falls apart. Might have to do with this. Let's do this. Okay, paste layer 1. Okay. That back on, hide that, select transparent, come on, transparent, select invert, turn that one back on, turn that off, move that up here, and what we're going to do is layer, crop to selection. Okay, let's got that one done. Come back in here, select all, there we go. Okay, edit, copy, come back in here, edit, paste, there we go, we got it working now. Select my move tool, grab the image, I'm going to shrink this one down a bit too, select it, now we're going to change that to 1024, scale it. Now let's move it around a bit. Just like that. That looks good. Okay, so now layer, new layer, and then layer. Okay, I lost the selection. I got to come back in here again. Turn that one off, select that. Oh, select that, select invert, select the pasted image, layer, crop to selection. So here are the 4 pictures that we're going to use in our model. Now to get these into ping format, all we do is do what we did with the other ones. Turn off the layers that we don't want to export, file, export as, and we're going to call this photo 1. Now let's just make sure photo 1 went in the way I hoped it did. Excellent. Turn off that one, turn that one on, file export, photo 2, file export, photo 3, and finally photo 4. Oh, I just overwrote photo 3. Okay, that's not a problem. Export, photo 4, turn that one off, come back here, and file export, send that back to photo 3, replace, yes, and let it go. So now we have the 4 photographs scaled to our actual picture size. Now we want to see these in Blender to see what they're going to look like on the actual model when we export it. So before we leave here, we're going to want to come back and use this particular session of GIMP again to create our VTFs. So what we're going to do is we're going to select this one and we're going to File, Save As, and we're going to call this one Decompile XCF, and we're going to put it into that project folder. And we're going to pick up this one and we're going to do the same thing, File, Save As, and we're going to call that pbadge new, and we're just going to save that into that project folder as well. So that now these are protected and ready for us to use again, and we can actually exit out of GIMP. Discard the changes. Now let's open Blender again, load our project. Here's our textures that we have currently, and to have a look and see what this is going to look like, we're going to load up those images in the image editor. So split our screen again, change this to the image UV editor, image, open image, and we're going to select all 4 of those photos and open them now. And then we're also going to open file, image, open the actual photo badge ping, no, new, photo badge new ping, open that one up. Okay, now with the object selected, go into the materials tab, select the material that you want to change, into the textures tab, down here to what the source is, and just change the source. Pbadge new, accept. So now that UV is using this new picture. For the actual decal, I'm going to come into the materials tab, select the decal, and instead of loading the new image, I'm going to go into edit mode. I'm going to select that, scroll in so I can see it. Down here, because I loaded the images, photo 1, there's photo 1 on the picture, or on the model. And that doesn't look too bad. The reason why I went with 1024 by 1024 is because I wanted the resolution, and basically that's it. So let's load up another image, open image, image 2, and there's that image as it would appear on our model. And again, image, open image, image 3, there's looking at you, and image, open image, photo 4, and there's our wolf. So that is how these pictures are going to look when we actually export the model and get it into Source Filmmaker. Could do no, I couldn't. I'd have to do a movie and make a image of the actual movie to show you what the animated GIF or what the animated VTF is going to look like. But I'm not going to go there with this particular session. We're probably running about 32 minutes now, and basically, I'm just going to close that down because I don't want to save anything in that Blender file. And that's using GIMP to create images for existing UVs. Any questions on this? Leave comments in the description or in the comments area, and I'll try to get back to you when I can. Okay, gang, Private Jack here. Welcome to part 9 in my series on how to decompile a valid model, get it into Blender, do some editing, and fire it back at Source Filmmaker. In this session, what we're going to do is we're going to get the model finalized and exported. We're going to write a quick QC and compile the model. We're going to try and use Blender and Crowbar as compiling tools. So let's get started. We're going to open up Blender. We're going to open up that project file that we've been working with. Here it is. We're not worried about these materials anymore because we've got new materials that are going to replace it in Source Filmmaker. First thing I want to do is I want to check and make sure that all the vertices are weighted and assigned to the bone that we have. So this bone is really small and hard to select. I'm going to use the outliner tool here and basically come into my armature area and select the metal bone. If I want to, what I can use is the numpad period key, and what that will do is it will zoom in on anything that is selected and set that item up as the pivot point for 3D or for the work camera. With that bone selected, I'm going to go into pose mode, and I'm also going to turn on screencast keys so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so basically with the bone selected and in pose mode, I'm going to hit R a couple of times until I get this little icon that goes in 4 directions. And I'm just going to take and I'm going to spin this model around to make sure that all the vertices move with the bone. As I mentioned before in other sessions of this tutorial, because this is a working model out of TF, all the bone weights should already be assigned to the bones. We shouldn't have to worry about weight painting. But because I moved that one bone, I just want to make sure that the model moves and it looks fine. If you end up with, we'll go into that later. Okay, so with that done, the next thing I want to do is I want to check the materials again. So I'm going to select the model and come into the materials tab, and I just want to make sure that my materials are uniquely named for this model in such a way that they're not going to interfere with other materials for models that I already have. And they look okay. So the next thing I'm going to do is go into Blender Source Tools, and I'm going to set that up. The way that I set it up is as follows. Export path is where I want my SMD or DMX files to export to. So I click on the little folder. I'm going to go into my photo project folder, and I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call that DMX. I prefer to use DMX files. You can use SMDs if you want, but they are passe, and DMX is the way of the future, boys. So get used to using it. I'm going to drill into that DMX folder, and I'm going to accept it. So now, when I export, my exports are going to go to that DMX folder. Next thing is selecting the export format. I prefer DMX now. I used to use SMDs, but now DMX is the way to go. For the model, the up axis, my up axis is Z, so I'm going to leave that as is on Z. If this model was lying on the ground and I wanted it to stand up in game, I would select Y or X depending on which way the top of the model was pointed. Next one is engine path, and what this is the folder that the flavor of Studio MDL is for the mod that you are creating the model for. In my case, I'm creating for Source Filmmaker, and Source Filmmaker has its own flavor of Studio MDL. So I'm going to click on the folder, and that lives in my Source Filmmaker game bin folder. Right here, there's the Studio MDL and the Studio MDL bat that I want to use. So with that folder selected, I click Accept. Material path I'm not going to fill in. I want to put the material path in my QC so that the models will actually find it. If I put a folder in here and the model uses materials from folders other than the one that I put in here, for some strange reason the model has a really hard time to find them, and you could end up with black and purple checkerboards on your model. So I'm just going to leave that blank. Here in the exportables areas, it shows you the objects that can be exported with the tool. Okay, in this case there's only one object, and that's this object here, but as you saw in the sniper demonstration that I did, there were a whole ton of objects in here. I can check them on or off if I want to export them in the scene, and basically we'll get into that a little bit deeper when we actually do the export. Not going to worry about subfolder. There are no vertex animations like I showed you, the shape keys that move the face, there's none in this model. The game path, what this is I'm going to use Blender Source Tools as my compiler interface. So what I need to do is I need to tell Blender Source Tools where the game info text file lives for the mod that I am creating the model for. In this case, I'm clicking the folder. I'm going to go into Source Filmmaker, Game, User Mod, and that is where the game info text file lives for creating Source Filmmaker models. I'm going to click Accept on that. And finally, the QC. This is the place where I am going to put my QC. You see this little button here? Right now, it thinks that there is a QC file in a folder that I was using before. I'm going to click on that folder, and I usually put my QCs in the DMX folder with my exports. So as soon as I select that folder and click Accept, that button is going to disappear, and this area down here is going to turn red, which means that there's no QCs in that particular folder at this time. With that done, Blender Source Tools is now set up. I can go and I can write my QC. So I'm just going to minimize this. I'm going to open up Notepad++. Okay, I'm going to create a new file, and basically what I can do is, because I created this from a Valve model with by decompiling it with Crowbar, Crowbar actually created a QC. So I can just go back to that project folder. Oh, I hate it when it does that. Desktop, photo project, and I can load up that QC file that was created when I decompiled the model. These are the various commands that Crowbar found in the model, okay? And what it has done is commented out anything that can possibly change after doing the edit. So what you see here is, this is an actual comment. It's telling me what VMTs are being used and where they live for the original model. It's this information here is information that can change if you do an edit. So basically it comments all this stuff out. This stuff isn't really required to compile a model, but it is required in the model eventually. We're going to go through that as we write up this QC. All models must have a sequence. It doesn't matter if it's an idle sequence or if it's a walking sequence or whatever it is, it must have at least one sequence. And we're going to get into that too when we edit this QC. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove created by Crowbar because it's not required. And let's just have a quick look here at something. I'm going to open up the Valve Developer Wiki. And if I do a search on QC and open up this category on QC commands, this is a list of all the various all the various QC commands that can be used when compiling a model. And if you click on them, like for that illumination position, it will take you and it'll give you a brief description of what that command is used for and how to use it. Back to QC commands, and basically this is where I get my information for writing my QCs. So model name is the name of the model and where it is going to live relative to the user mod models folder. So in my case, I want it to go to private jack, models, props, and I'm going to also put it in a folder called pbadge, and I'm going to name the model pbadge_new.mdl. That is a pretty unique name, and it shouldn't interfere with any other model that I have in my inventory. Okay, next thing is body groups, body, and model. If you come here and you look at the fundamentals, model is used primarily if there are flexes in the model. So the reason for that is that there are other commands that you can add to this particular command to control some of the flexes. As this model doesn't have any flexes, I'm not going to worry about that. Move back, body, as that description said, is used for primarily anything that doesn't need to be changed. By changed, I mean like the sniper's hat was a body group. It could be turned on or turned off. The sniper's arm and the arm with glove were two different models that could be interchanged. For that type of environment, you need to use a body group. But if the model is whole and in one place and isn't going to be changed, using $body is good enough. Let's go back to the QC. In this particular case, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use a body group, and I'm going to actually have it so that I can spawn the model and turn it off or turn it on. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use body group, and I'm going to call the body group body. And anytime that you use a body group, if there's mesh involved, you have to use a studio prefix before the actual DMX file that you're going to create. So basically, in this case, what's going to be exported is photo badge reference DMX, photo badge reference, and I change that extension to DMX. CD materials. This is where we're going to actually tell the model where the materials live. So in this particular case, I want to keep the root directory known. I also want to tell it that my materials are going to live in, and this is relative to the user mod materials folder. So models, private jack, props, pbadge, and that is where my model materials are going to live. Now I'm going to create an error in this QC by not closing off the CD materials with a quote. I started it with a quote, I should end it with a quote. Surface prop, basically default, we'll just leave that the way it is, contents are solid. And another command that I usually put in all my QCs is $mostly opaque. What mostly opaque does is it causes the model to go through and do a second render of any materials that it finds to be transparent, okay? And what it'll do is it'll go through, it will render anything that's opaque, then it'll come back through and it'll pick up any of the materials that are translucent. Okay, back we go. Illumination position, I'm not going to worry about. It's needed for special circumstances such as Gibbs, and I have no Gibbs in this particular model. Binding boxes, I'm not going to worry about. I don't require a binding box in my Source Filmmaker model. CD box, I have no idea what that is, and I don't even know if it's listed here anymore. I'm not even going to go looking for it. CD box, oh, C box, there it is. Sex collision box model, what coordinates are relative is currently unknown. So no one really knows what this thing is about. Hitboxes. Hitboxes are important, but for now, I don't require it to do an initial compile. I'm going to leave it the way it is. Actually, I just might turn on the default hitbox set. So I just want to check that command out because sometimes this works and sometimes that doesn't. Hitbox set. Create named hitbox. Okay. I'm going to leave that set to default and leave it checked on. Lastly, what we get into is the sequence. All models must have a sequence, as I said before. In this particular, when we did the decompile, it actually created an idle SMD file. Unfortunately, because we've moved bones and moved mesh around, this particular file won't work for us anymore. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up the main reference mesh, and I'm going to use that as the sequence. So copy that, and drop that right in here. Control V. And this is going to become my idle sequence. Because the model doesn't move, the FPS rate doesn't really matter. I'm going to turn that down to 1 frame per second. Okay, now that we have that done, what I'm going to do is I'm going to file and save this as in my DMX folder. And watch down here what happens when I save the QC. I'm going to save this as pbadge.qc. As soon as I hit enter, and with that QC path pointed to my DMX folder, it automatically creates a compile button. Okay, now for Crowbar, I'm going to rename this model as pbadge_new_cd for Crowbar, and nothing. Oh, I know what I forgot. Before I do that, I have to put in my texture groups, or it's not going to find those new skins that we made for it. So after I did the CD materials, I'm going to have multiple skins. So what I need to use is a texture group for multiple skins. The frame is not going to change, so I don't have to identify it. It's already identified here in the materials, and it will find that material anyway. But for the photos, they actually change. So I'm going to add a $texture group, and I'm going to give it a name of photo, and I'm going to open up the texture group by using a curly bracket. Next, I'm going to come down here, and in my materials, the first material must be called pbadge decal. So Bodon pbadge_deco. Before I do that, I got to turn on this particular skin with a curly bracket, and I have to turn it off with a curly bracket. The next skin can be named whatever I want it to be named, but this particular skin must be named the same as the actual material name that I gave it in Blender. Okay, so hit enter. Next material I'm going to call photo 2. Actually, let's call it Decompile 2, P-badge. Let's keep it all unique. Copy, and this means I may have to change the names of my photos when I actually, and this is going to be 1, add the next one. This one is going to be 2. I missed the, copy that, delete that. Control B. This one is going to be P2, P3, and I'm going to have 5 material skins for this particular model. 1, 2, 3, 4, and the last one is going to be 4. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 5 materials. Now to close off the group, I have to close off the group with a curly bracket. So anything between these 2 curly brackets, part of this photo group, and these are the materials that are going to be replaced. Okay, that should take care of my actual QC. I'm going to file save that again, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create one for compiling with Crowbar. So I'm just going to rename the model to CB. Okay, that should, oh, here, almost forgot that out. And like I said, body group, what I want to do is I want to create a body that I can turn off. So studio and the name of the DMX file that's going to be compiled, and then under that I'm going to put blank. So on, off. If I put blank ahead of the studio, it would spawn in invisible mode. Now I can save this, and we're ready to rock with Blender. And here I'm going to change this to CB, and I'm going to save this one as P-badge underscore CB, and we'll use this QC to compile from Crowbar. Now if I look at my Blender source tools, what I'm going to do is I'm going to see 2 QC buttons here now, because I put that in the same folder as the original. Okay, let's get ready to rock and roll. To export the model, once I have Blender source tools set up, all I have to do is click on the export button, and it's going to give me the option to either export the selected object that I have in exportables, or the entire group of DMX files that are in the scene. So it will export them if the checkbox is turned on. If the checkbox is turned off, it will not export anything. There's nothing in the scene. Okay, so export, I'm going to export the scene, and up here what I'm going to find is a message telling me that the file either exported or that there was an error. If there was an error, what I would do is I would come into my Windows file option here, menu option here, and toggle on the system console. And in here, I'm going to find any information about that last process with any errors that have been reported. In this case, one file exported in less than a second. When you're in the screen, never, never, never press that X button unless you want to exit Blender, because as soon as you push that X button, Blender shuts down. Either minimize it or turn the screen off. Now that the file is exported, if I go into my folder, I'm going to find my QCs that I wrote and that DMX file. Okay, now that that's done, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here, and I've caused an error in the QC. I'm going to compile it. So I click on the QC button, and right here, 0 compiled, 1 error. So I go back into my console view, which will now be minimized. There it is. And here's the information on that compile. And what I can read here is that it was compiling, and then all of a sudden it found an error on line 12. Bad command, and it has a curly bracket there. This is why I like Notepad++. Basically, I can come into my file, and I'm going to open up that QC because I renamed, there we go. So I've got both of those files. Okay, I'm going to come into the QC, come down here to line 12, and what is going on here? That's the wrong one. File, open, there it is, P-badge QC. Okay, move that on this side. I'm going to come down here to line 12, and I'm going to see that there's nothing there. And the next thing that comes up is the texture group with the curly bracket. So looking at that command, that is a good command. I go to the one before it, and remember I told you I left the rotation mark off of the end of the CD materials. I'm going to add that. I'm not going to do it in the Crowbar QC yet, because I want to see if it's going to report an error. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to bad, just to cause another error. File, save as, or save. Once I save that, all I have to do is click on the QC button again. Click on the QC button, didn't compile, I still have another error. So I'm going to go back into my system console, I'm going to read the information. Line 13, bad command, text group. Oh, I must have misspelled something. So scroll up here to line 13, text group should be texture group. Save it, compile the QC again, still another error. What's going on here? So I open up that system console view again, and down on line 58, it could not load the file, bad photo, badge, reference DMX. The reason being, there's no such animal in my mix. So open up the QC again, come down and fix the error, save the file, and run the QC again. This time, one compiled source FilmMaker QC. So if I go into my source FilmMaker user mod, models, private jack, P badge folder, I am going to find the DMX files for the, or not the DMX files, I'm going to find the actual model files for this model. Okay, let's go into Crowbar and do the compile test. So I'm going to launch Crowbar, As I said in the decompile session, Crowbar is not only a decompiler, but it is a compiler interface as well. Click on the compiler tab, and usually Crowbar is set up to run Gary's mod. Okay, I'm going to get rid of that. Okay, to set this thing up for Source FileMaker, and if you look down here, you can see that it is set up for Gary's mod. If you come up here and click on this down arrow button and select Source FileMaker, it's going to find the location for Studio MDL in the Source FileMaker game bin folder, and it's going to tell it that the game info text file is located in Source FileMaker game user mod. If perchance you have this installed on an F drive or somewhere else, you can change the actual setup, and the way that you do that is by coming up here and clicking on the Setup Games button. All you have to do is browse to where these files live on your particular system. Do a save and close, and the tool is set up. Now, for the QC, we're going to browse, and we're going to go into the Photo Project DMX folder and pick up that Photo Badge CB QC. So now it's telling it that it wants to do verbose pbadge CB QC. Once that's there, all I have to do is click on the Compile QC. It'll run through, and it found an error on line 12, and that is our little error that we created by not putting in the quotation marks. File save that. Recompile. Found an error on line 13, which is the text group, should be texture group. Save that. Recompile. Compiling gets down to here, and it says everything is hunky-dory. Look back through the code, see if there are any more errors or warnings that came up, and there aren't. And the reason why is because I didn't change that to bad photo badge reference DMX. So now if I go into my user mod models, private jack, props, pbadge folder, I am going to find the model files that were created by the two tools. Well, awful lot of stuff that went on in that particular session, and it's probably a long one. So what I'm going to do is, now that we have the models compiled, I'm going to exit out of everything. Okay gang, Private Jack here. Welcome to part 10 in my series on how to decompile a Valve model, get it into Blender, change it up a little bit, and fire it back at Source FileMaker. So we now have a compiled model, and we compiled it using both Blender and Crowbar. So now you have a good idea what it takes to get that model into Blender, edit it up, and actually export and compile the model. What we have to do now is we have to fix the textures for it, and we want to fix the skins. To do that, we're going to use GIMP in the VTF plugin, and if you remember rightly, when we created the pings so that we could see what they look like, we created two XCF files. Those are GIMP configuration files, and right now they are containing the information that we need to actually make these skins. So we're going to open those two files up. Open the pbadge and the decal. We're going to open both of those up. We're going to select the frame XCF, and we're going to export this to where it needs to live as a VTF file. So basically, I'm not going to make any more changes. I'm going to make sure that I have my pbadge UV image turned off. Select the layer that I want to actually import or export. Come over here, File, Export, and all I need to do now is change this folder to my user mod, and where I'm getting the information from is from my QC. So I want to go to User Mod, Materials, because everything material related is based off of the mod materials folder. I want to go to Models, Private Jack, Props, Models, Private Jack, Props, and I want to create a folder in this folder, and that is the pbadge folder. Create a folder, pbadge, and I want to drill into that. And where I got that information is right here. This is where I want that new VTF to go, and I'm going to name it the same name as I gave it in my materials panel back in Blender. So I'm going to click on the materials panel. That was pbadge. So I'm going to call this pbadge.vtf. Home, V, and VTF. As soon as I hit export, it's going to bring up the VTF interface, and here is where I can change the various types of VTF files. For this one, it's nothing, merge visible. Okay, I want the alpha channels. I'm going to leave it as a 7.4 orange box 2007 type file. Leave the maps on, and hit OK. That now created this particular image in my pbadge materials, or in my materials pbadge folder. So materials, models, private jack, props, pbadge, and here's the VTF. Okay, now I have to do the same for the other four pictures here. So I'm going to turn on one, make sure I have it selected, file export. This is the first image that I want my model to display. So using my Blender's material naming convention, I'm going to call it pbadge decal. I'm going to use my recently used, come into my pbadge folder, change this to pbadgedecal.vtf. This here is going to be nothing because it's a standalone image. Leave everything else the same and hit OK. And where did it go? There it is. Okay, so there is the first image that our skins are going to call. To do the next ones, all I do is make sure I have it turned on, selected, file export, and I should still be in that pbadge folder. So all I have to do now is rename my file. And what I'm going to name it by is the naming conventions that I gave my textures in my QC. So this one is going to be decal1. Pbadge decal1, VTF, hit enter, nothing, right, OK. And I do that for the other two. Turn that one off, file export, decal2, OK, turn that one off, that one on, select layer, export, Deco3, okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to create that animated texture, and the way that I do that is first off, I don't want this UV picture in the animated VTF, not GIF, but VTF, so I'm going to delete this layer. I'm going to turn on the other three so that all four are visible. I'm going to come over here to File. Before I do that, I'm going to select the first picture that I want to actually play. I'm going to File, Export, and I'm going to change this to Decompile because it'll be the last skin that's loaded, and it's a VTF file. I'm going to export it. Hello, export. There we go. Okay, here in Use Layer As, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change that to animation frames. And what that will do is it will cause this VTF group to actually become like an animated GIF. Okay, so I'm going to leave everything else the same and click OK. This one's going to take a little bit longer, and it's going to be about 5 or 6 megs big. There it is. So I can't actually see this thing play in my Windows browser, and I can't really see it play in GIMP. The way that I can verify that this is an actual animated VTF is by launching VTF Edit. Hello, VTF Edit. Come on. I'm going to minimize GIMP right now. I'm in VTF Edit. I'm going to go to the material folders with it open, and user mod, materials model, private jack, props, p badge. Okay, here's that GIF, or that VTF that I just created that's supposedly animated. I'm going to open that, and you say, well, it's not moving. And the reason for that is that it's in frames. If I press play or change the frame number, we can see that it is actually animated. Press play, and that is what is going to play. The way we control the actual speed of the texture is through the VMT. Okay, let's stop that for now. And now that we have VTF Edit open, we're going to use the Tools section here and actually create simple VMTs for these materials. And this is how simple it is. All I have to do is load the base texture and bitmap, bump maps, and other stuff if I have it. In this case, I only have a base texture. I go into Options, and I have to change the shader because Source FileMaker does not work with mapped generic. I'm going to change the shader to vertex generic, vertex lit generic. Surface, I'm going to have a quick look here and see if there's any surfaces. Flash, paper, do I have paper? No. So I'm going to just leave it default. Keyword text add, it's not a translucent material, and I want it to no call in case I can see through one of the pieces of mesh on the actual model. Okay, once that's done, all I have to do is press create, and it will create the simple VMT. To do the next one, because none of these settings are going to change, all I have to do is load my textures. So P badge, open, create, decal, open, create. And it automatically uses the VTF file name as the base name for the VMT. These first two textures that I'm using must match the names of the materials that I have in Blender. So here we go, decal 1, open, create, open, 2, open, create, 3, open, create. I'm finished using VTF Edit. This is just a quick way of doing very simple VMTs. So I can close that, close that. Now what I have to do is I have to come back and I have to edit this Decal4 VMT because it has a proxy where the actual texture is an animated VTF, and I have to tell Source FileMaker that it has to play the frames. So I'm going to open this in Notepad++. Here's the very simple VMT, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go off to the developer website. I'm going to type the word proxy in here, or proxies. I'm going to scroll down here, and I'm going to go to the list of material proxies page. I'm going to scroll down a little bit and look up animated textures. So here's the animated texture, and the various information that I have to add to that texture. So the first thing I have to add, and when I'm working with something new and I don't know how to do it, what I'll do is I'll actually go and find a material that already has a sample of that in here. So in this case, I'm going to open the Sniper Blue in Volin, and down here we have animated textures. So this is what that has to look like. I'm going to pick up that proxy and the animated textures statement. I'm going to copy that, bring it back into Decal4, and I'm going to paste it. Okay, so basically what this is saying is it's an animated texture, and the texture that is animated is the bump map. This particular VTF does not have a bump map. What I need to use is the actual base texture. So I changed that to base texture, and it's saying that the bump frame variable, frame number variable, is dependent on the number of frames in the bump map. Well, we don't have a bump map, so this actually becomes frames. And this here is a float number of how many frames per second the frame is going to actually play. If I leave that at 70, it's going to flash before your eyes so fast that you can't actually see it. So I'm going to turn this way down, and as it's a float, I can use decimal numbers to about 0.5. So half a frame a second. Okay, with that, now I have to look at my curly brackets. So I've got an open for the texture. I've got an open for proxies. I've got an open for the animated texture. I've got a close for the animated texture, but I don't have a close for the actual proxy. So I have to tab over and close off the proxy, and then I finally have a close for the texture. So now I can file save that, and that's that VMT written for the animated GIF. That is animated GIF, animated VTF. I'm going to close that down. I'm going to come back into Blender now, we have the model compiled, and I'm going to launch the Half-Life Model Viewer from Blender. So come back into my Scenes tab, scroll down to Blender Source Tools, down here at the bottom below the all this information, I've got Launch HLMV. I click on that, file, load the model. Here's my two models that I created, the one from Blender and the one from Crowbar. I'm going to click it on, and here's my model. Yeah, spin it around, have a quick look. What's not too bad. I'm going to now move into Model and have a look at my skins. I've got 5 skins, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I don't know why the frame doesn't work. Basically, I can't really see whether or not this is actually playing an animated VTF. Okay, even if I select the material itself and come down and select the material here, it still doesn't give me that frame ability. So I'm going to have to check that someplace else. Now remember, we gave this thing a blank body group. So here under body, I'm going to look here, and I've got 2 submodels. I've got visible and I have invisible. So there's my body groups. They work. Bones, I'm going to highlight the bone. There's my bone. And hitboxes now. Hitboxes are important. Basically what they do is they encompass the actual model. And as it stands right now, this particular model has no hitboxes. If I spawn this in Source Filmmaker, what's going to happen is if the camera hits an exposed piece of mesh, this model may disappear from the camera. Still in the game, but it may disappear from the camera. I believe the camera uses hitboxes as a target type environment for the model. I don't know, but there's been problems reported about this in the past. So I'm going to turn off automated hitboxes. I'm going to select the metal bone. I'm going to create a new bone. Where do I do that now? Add new hitbox. There we go. I'm going to create a new hitbox rather. And this thing is massive. All I want to do is make it cover that particular picture based on the metal bone. So down here, I have the ability of changing the size of my hitboxes. I'm going to turn that down to 2. And tab doesn't work. You actually have to click into the box to change it. 2, and I'm going to change that to 2, just to give me a reference of where I'm at. I update the hitbox. That's where my hitbox is now. So I've got to increase it on the up-down axis. This is probably front. No, this is left and right, I think. So I'm going to increase that to 6. Update the hitbox. There we go. It is left and right. Okay. And it's a little bit big, so probably about a 4.5. Update the hitbox, and right here I've got mesh clipping through the hitbox, and that's no good. So I'm going to ramp that up to 5. Update the hitbox. Now my mesh is inside the hitbox, but I can move it over a little, and I want to go -1 to move it over. Not too far. -0.2. Update the hitbox. There, that looks better. More centered. Now I want to increase the length of it, or the height of it. I'm going to come in here and go probably 10. Update the hitbox. 10 is too big, and basically I want to move this hitbox down a little bit, so I'm going to move it down so that it's about center here. So that's probably down about 3. Update the hitbox, wrong way, -3. And this position is based on the bone that I have selected. So that looks probably -2.5. Hitbox. That looks a little bit better. This can probably come up to an 8, not 89. 8. Update the hitbox even more. 6. That's not too bad. And for the actual depth of it, I want to -0.2. Update the hitbox. Wrong way. 0.2. Update the hitbox. And I want to shrink that down to probably 1. Update the hitbox. And I'm outside the hitbox. So if the camera hits that corner there, this model would probably disappear. So bring that back up to 2. And that looks like it's pretty good. There's no mesh clipping through the hitbox, and that should be good. Now you're saying, okay, that's all fine and good, but how am I going to get this information into where it needs to go? And basically all you do is you click here on Generate QC, back into your QC, right here, down here where it had the hitbox information. I'm going to select all that, and I'm going to just copy and paste the new hitbox information into it. So the QC block generated by Half-Life Model Viewer, the surface prop is default, hitbox set is default, that's the name of the hitbox, and here is the hitbox information that was actually added to that model. Delete that, file save the actual QC again, and recompile. Come back into the Half-Life Model Viewer, turn off the hitboxes, okay, and what we're going to do now is we're going to actually reload the model. So load it, there's the model, turn on hitboxes, there's the hitbox, and if I come into the bone section, I can highlight the hitbox for that particular bone. There's only one bone. Back into render, I can turn off that hitbox, go into bones, and there it is. So basically our model now has a hitbox. All that done, all that completed, and guess what? Exit out of Half-Life Model Viewer, come down here, jump into Source Filmmaker, launch, and we're going to load up both of those models, the one with hitbox and the one without. And probably it won't cause any problems not having the hitbox, because Source Filmmaker auto-generates hitboxes anyway, but you never know. It's always good to just make sure that your model is completely encased in hitboxes. We've done a final compile, we've done all the textures, we're going to load it up in Source Filmmaker, and here we go. I'm not going to load a map in this particular case, because all I want to do is look at the actual models in the model viewer. Create an animation set for new model. I want to find my P badge, looking in all mods. Here's the new. This is the one that I created with Blender. did the compile with Blender. So here's the skins, 0, 1, 2, 3, and the animated texture. And the animated texture. Come on, texture, animate. Why are you not animating? 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Maybe I might have to load a map. Okay, while this was loading up, I saw an error on the material 4, which is our actual animated GIF. So if I come down here and change the skin to 4, let's see if I get that error back. Now, what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to go and find it. Oh, come on, where are you? There it is. Animated texture unavailable to initialize. Oh, I know what I did wrong. Duh, I think. Where are you? BMT, base texture, model. Yeah, proxies. That should work. P-badge, Decompile 4, proxy, base texture. That's right, frame. Frame. A simple S. Save that. Mat. Reload. Oh, materials. A little S. Back camera off. Go to the body. What we have is the root transform. I'm going to grab the position of the root transform. Come on. There we go. I'm going to grab the position of the root transform. Go into motion editor. Default this. And the picture pulls itself up onto the floor based on the root transform. As you can see now, my textures are now changing because I fixed the S that was in frames back to frame. And if I look here now and select the unknown, I have the metal bone, which is sitting up here. The model is rotatable here. The model is rotatable here. So if I want to lay this thing down on the ground, I can select the root transform and lie it down on the ground. I can spawn multiple models, copy, paste, and we're going to paste another one, and another one, and another one. Grab this one, move it off to the side. 1, 2, 3, and 4 for 5. Okay, they're all playing the animated GIF right now because I copied it with that particular skin turned on. Come in here, turn back to skin 0, turn this one to skin 1, turn this one to skin 2, turn this one to skin 3. Come on, stop lagging out on me now. There we go. So there we have all 5 pictures, including the one that's animated. So basically, oh, the other thing, body groups. Right click on the badge, one of them. I'm going to take this one, set body group, come down here. Badge is turned on, badge is turned off. So there you have it. One valve model taken from its valve MDL format, decompiled, taken into Blender, edited to be a usable prop, exported, recompiled, textured, and brought back into Source File Maker.